Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to the Normal America Show. Happy Thanksgiving. Hope you all had a wonderful day. I know I did. Ate myself fat. I was already fat, but didn't do myself any favors with it. No, it was good. I had multiple family events for Thanksgiving. It cost me an ability to stream this week, and for that I apologize. But we ended up doing sort of a slumber party at Hank's grandparents' Wednesday night, and then all day yesterday we were busy. I expected to get home earlier than I did. Unfortunately, didn't get home until late in the evening. Conservative Carnage, thanks so much. I appreciate helping set up the interview that we're going to do tonight. But no, it was a fantastic Thanksgiving. I am continually blessed and one of the luckiest people alive to have such a great family, to have relatively good health, and to just be extremely lucky. And a day like Thanksgiving is always a great time to take stock of that. So one of my favorite holidays. I love seeing people. I have more people to see. Actually had a friend that just stopped in last minute and just left as I was coming up here. So it was fun to spend time with them as well. So, but no, I got a good one for you tonight. We're supposed to be interviewing the great Scott Horton coming up here at 7 p.m. Of course, he has a new book out called Provoked, How Washington Started the New Cold War with Russia and the Catastrophe in Ukraine. That came out November 16th. He is sending me a copy of that book, so that is going to be, thank you, I'm glad you like the beard. That's going to be top of my list, trying to get that book read here in the next month or so. Hopefully have that read by the new year. But I can't wait. Enjoyed listening to Scott talk in the past. Very excited for an opportunity to interview him. So that's supposed to be at 7 p.m. I think we have Scott for about an hour. And then after that hour, we'll go ahead and take call-ins if people want to talk about Russia, Ukraine, or anything else. We'll take call-ins and be able to do that. But you have to bear with me if I have any technical issues. We're trying to do this call through Zoom. Hopefully there's no issues on that, but you know how I am. So you're going to lose my camera here for a moment because I want to activate my camera on Zoom to make sure that it's working all right. So you should still be able to hear me. But let's see if I get this camera working over here. And there we go. A little blurrier, but look at that. We'll just do that. And then when Scott jumps in, we'll be good to go. So he's supposed to be joining us around 7. I wanted to come on a few minutes early, give the audience a chance to come in. Of course, I know my editor, Black Elk, is doing a lot of family stuff this week as well, so he's probably not watching right now, but I'm sure he will edit this, and we'll be able to have this as a standalone video, the interview with Scott's here, in the future. So we'll do it live for all of you, and then we'll get it up as a standalone feature as well. But how was you all's Thanksgiving? I hope everyone had a great time. I certainly did. Are you tired of turkey yet? Or are you like my family where you end up having turkey leftovers for like ever after Thanksgiving? Also, if I would have streamed last night late, I don't know how many people would have watched. I was interested I almost gave it a go. It would have been like 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. But ultimately I decided, probably wasn't going to happen. But no, it was a good day for me, and I'm blessed. I have a lot of places to go. So we went to Courtney's grandma's, then we went to my place of work, the one gentleman that I work with. We got to spend some time with him. Went to Courtney's aunts, went to Courtney's mom's. My family, my side of the family, was doing other stuff yesterday. So hopefully I'll be seeing them shortly, which will be nice. And then we were going to put up the Christmas tree and stuff today, but we got busy. So Christmas tree is going to be when I get off work Wednesday. We're going to try to put that up and start rolling on that. The lights outside the house. Hopefully we get an unseasonably warm day. We got snow here, too, in Pennsylvania. Thursday night? Yeah. It was snowing pretty bad there last night. Wednesday night into Thursday, yeah. So, yeah, it was good stuff. Now, unfortunately, I haven't been following much of the news the past 3 days or so because, I've been doing family stuff, which is great. But I did see one story that I wanted to talk to Scott about, which is, you never know how true these things are, but allegedly I was reading that Zelensky has came out and said that they were willing to cede some land to end the war, which is interesting and what they should do. But we'll see. Does anybody have any interesting politics fights at their Thanksgiving dinner? I did not. I avoided it. But my wife almost did get in an argument about the Menendez brothers, the two brothers that there was a famous trial about them like 30 years ago. Apparently there's a documentary out about it, and some people had some strong feelings. My wife has seen the documentary and was going to weigh in. I don't know what position she was going to take, but that was as close to an argument that occurred at our Thanksgiving dinner table. So, and you might say, well, that's because everyone in your family is a big Trump supporter. No, not at all. In fact, the one house I was at, I would go so far as to say probably the majority of the people there, not big Trump fans, but they are conservative. So it was interesting. But we're blessed that I think most of the people in my family know it's not worth ruining relationships or, situations like that. Junior Alcala, thanks so much for the $5 super chat. Rob, I hope you had a good Thanksgiving family. God bless. Trump 2024. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I did see a little of the volleyball stuff, but just the bare minimum that this team, in order to qualify for like the college tournament, had to do so well in the tournament that they're in, and they won. And then we're playing a team that has a transgender biological male on the team, so they're forfeiting. But that's all I saw. I don't know much of the details other than that. So if you're just tuning in, we're waiting. Great Scott Horton's going to join us. Scott, I know, is a big fan. He put out a book previously of interviews that he had with Ron Paul. And Ron Paul, as everyone knows, is my favorite politician in the United States that's still alive. And I highly respect that. So maybe I'll get a chance to ask him about that as well. I think it'd be interesting. But he's supposed to be joining at 7 p.m. So that's a couple minutes here. We'll give him a chance to get situated in, and then sorry, just checking my emails, make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, there you go, Donald Mack. Yeah, see you on Christmas unless nuke war. Yeah. Well, that's where we're at as a society, it feels like. Make sure I didn't screw up Eastern. 7 p.m. Eastern, 29th. That's yeah. Okay. Biden's going to forgive some of the debt? No. Who would have thought? That was almost... Yeah, I know, Scott. I missed a lot of Scott's recent interviews. But it's good that he's hitting the tour and getting out there. You got to give it to Cenk Uyghur, like for... I don't know if he's reading tea leaves or what, but it's so funny. Cenk just tweets out 4 hours ago, or posts out on X. He says, I've been trying to figure out why I'm more optimistic now than I was before the election, even though I was so against the guy who won. I know now. MAGA is not my mortal enemy, and neither is the extreme left. My mortal enemy is the establishment, and they have been defeated. Okay, so you didn't realize that you were defending them for 4 years? You didn't realize when you were pushing to beat Trump in 2020 that you were defending the establishment? That's interesting. So he is insufferable. That's a good word. I wonder if there's anyone who's ever called me insufferable. I would bet. I bet there's people that are like, Rob's insufferable. Just catching up on some posts just to make sure I didn't miss any emails here. And then I used to have a tradition before I had a kid. My tradition was on Thanksgiving, we always watched the movie The Last Waltz. It is a concert of one of my favorite bands, The Band. We used to watch it every Thanksgiving, my wife and I. And we did not this year. That used to be our big tradition now. Insufferably reasonable. Maybe. I think my voice is annoying. So that probably leads to some insufferability. All right. I did get to watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I did. I watched it at the in-laws' house Wednesday night. One of my all-time favorites. I like still holds up so well. They don't make movies like that anymore. If you've never seen it, two things worth that I caught my attention this time. First is it's quite a wholesome movie. You wouldn't think of it as like a family movie necessarily. Like it's not like rated PG or anything. But there's not like any nudity or like explicit violence or anything like that. It's very wholesome. But knowing a little of how the movie industry works, there's one scene where Steve Martin drops the F word like 14 times in a row. And it's so funny because it's like, other than that, you could see this movie basically being rated PG-13. But you know it's going to be rated R when you drop like a string of F words like that. So that was pretty funny. And then the line that just catches me, I like this time, that was just amazing. They're in the car when they're like towards the end where they finally get this rental car and they're driving. And Steve Martin's driving at this point. And it's late at night and they're getting on each other's nerves. And Steve Martin's just like, John Candy's fidgeting with his seat. And Steve Martin's getting tired of it. He's like, would you stop making all this noise? Stop fidgeting with your seat. And John Candy's like, you do things that annoy me too. And Steve Martin's like, really? Oh, we'll talk afterwards. Scott, can you hear me?
Yeah, man. How about me?
You sound good, man. You sound good. Thanks so much for joining us.
Sure.
So, we're ready to go. If you are, we can just hop in live. It's totally up to you, though. It'll be pretty informal.
Oh, yeah. We're on? Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So, everyone, I'll finish my story about the great movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles in an hour. We don't want to waste...
Oh, man, no. Go ahead. I want to hear it.
All right.
I got one.
Okay, so the line that caught me this time, because I watch it like every Thanksgiving, John Candy's fidgeting with his seat in the car, right, the rental car, and Steve Martin's like yelling at him about it, and John Candy's like, you do things that annoy me too, and Steve Martin's like, what? And the first thing he comes up with, it just cracks me up every time. He's like, you play with your balls a lot. It's so abrupt how he says it, and he's so pleased with himself. He's just like, yeah, and it cracks me up every time. What do you got? What's your story from it?
Oh, I don't know.
It's a great movie. We could go for an hour on it, but
I saw it with my folks when I was a little kid when it came out in the theater.
I don't think they make movies like that anymore. It's a shame. But so ladies and gentlemen, joining me this evening, the great Scott Horton. He's got a new book out called Provoked: How Washington Started the New Cold War with Russia and the Catastrophe with Ukraine. He's been hitting the circuit, just crushing debates everywhere. I saw, even on this Thanksgiving week, I saw you were out there doing yeoman's work with all these warmongers, trying to steer them straight. So thank you so much for joining us tonight, Mr. Scott Horton.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
All right. So I do a lot of debates with people, particularly on the Russia-Ukraine stuff, and my first interest really in the region probably came once the impeachment of Trump started to come about, the original one with the
Okay.
the perfect phone call and all of that. One of the things talk a lot about the people, and I only know a baseline of this, is whether or not the U.S. was involved in a color revolution in Ukraine that resulted in sort of the initial invasion under Obama. Now, I thought maybe that would be a good place to start because I know you give a huge list of reasons of aggression from the West and the United States in particular. But on that particular issue, when we go back and we look at the ousting of Yanukovych, did the United States actually engage in a color revolution, or was this something sort of organic from the people of Ukraine?
Well, sort of is the key word, right? So it's both when you put it that way. So it's the same thing they did 10 years before under W. Bush in the Orange Revolution of 2004. In that case, Yanukovych had supposedly won the election. It was close, and both sides claimed the other side was trying to rig it and so forth. But the American, very well financed side said, no, see, our exit polls proved that we're the ones who won and you're the one who stole it. And I think there was some evidence of some rigging on the other side as well. But you had the West come in, spend tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars, and they held a big carnival, essentially this big color revolution, the Orange Revolution, until they could force the Yanukovych to agree to a third round of elections, which was unconstitutional, but he gave in on that, and then he lost on the third round, and the American chosen favorites won. And that was how the Orange Revolution had played out. So now this is 10 years later. The people who had won the Orange Revolution had totally ruined everything and had been discredited and forced out, and Yanukovych had won again. Now, so by the time of it's Viktor Yanukovych, he's from the Party of Regions, which represented Eastern oligarchs. They would say, oh, that makes him purely a sock puppet of the Kremlin, but that's not exactly true. He's a sock puppet of Eastern oligarchs in Eastern Ukraine, and they have their own relationships with Russia, which are also not completely cut and dry in that manner. In fact, I'll try to remember something smart to say about that in a minute. But anyway, so this guy Yanukovych, he won in 2010, free and fair, no question about it, crushed the American chosen favorites. And then he was the president from 2010 through our controversy, bring us up to date to the Maidan revolution that you're referring to, the Maidan revolution that you're referring to in 2014. That brings us up to late 2013, okay? Now, so here's where I'm going to remember to say something smart. I urge you and all of your audience to go and watch, I'm sure you're familiar with the Patrick Bet-David show.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
Great interviewer, brilliant guy. Okay, he did this interview with Paul Manafort. Now, Manafort, he's partners with Roger Stone. He is a very slick political operator, campaign manager, mostly for foreign thugs and dictators around the global South. Not a very nice guy. He's buddies with Roger Stone, and they're kind of slimy political operator guys. Now, if you listen to the Democrats tell it, which is obviously be false, I already showed right there by saying I'm paraphrasing the Democrats. You know that what I'm about to say is not true when I set it up that way. The Democrats claimed that Paul Manafort was Vladimir Putin's agent who controlled Donald Trump. And because of what a slave of Putin Manafort was, and then he was the agent that they used to control Trump in the Russiagate hoax. Now, I'm sure your audience already would agree with me, but you should know it's just true that Russiagate was an entire hoax before the Ukraine Gate hoax. Thing was entirely fake and false, but that was, part of the setup. Anyway, so just to explain, Manafort's role there, all those assumptions about who he was and what his interests were are wrong. This is where you got to listen to his interview on the Patrick Bet-David show. He would disagree with me a lot about what I'm about to explain about what happened there. He actually sounds just like the Hawks. He sounds like a John McCain guy on Ukraine and Russia. Literally, he sounds just like Michael McFaul or Ann Applebaum or any of the American anti-Russian hawks. And he's very anti-Russia. His job, and honestly, dude, this is not a put on. And you watch this interview, it's 2 hours long or something. He's going off. This is not an act. It's so clear what's happening here. Okay. His job working for Yanukovych was to help him move west, to help him join with the European Union, break away from Russian influence. And part of that was those Eastern Ukrainian oligarchs that Yanukovych worked for. You're supposed to be like, oh, Eastern, that means Russian, and just leave it at that. But in fact, Manafort explains that, and I think he's referring to Firtash and some of these others who backed the party regions, they wanted to move west. And the way he explains it was, he says, compared to the actual Russian oligarchs, these Eastern Ukrainian sort of pseudo-Russian oligarchs were always treated like the redheaded stepchild. And were always kind of used and abused and frozen out of good deals and whatever by their Russian better oligarchs, right? And whenever their side loses an election or a fake revolution and pro-Western factions come to power in Kiev, the first thing they do is nationalize their companies and then give them to their friends, which sounds crazy in America. You know, that's not the way it is. In the West, that's not the way it is. That's the way it is over there. You know, Barack Obama wins an election. He nationalizes Citigroup and hands it to his buddy.
Right.
No, wait, actually, Citigroup were Barack Obama's buddies. They're the ones who put him in there. So use a different example.
Right.
Wait. So they were sick and tired of that. And these Eastern oligarchs thought that if they joined with the EU or signed, this is not full membership, but there was an association agreement with the EU, but it means they got to sign up for more and more Western norms and ways of doing things, that if they did that, then that would put an end to their companies being seized and taken away from them and this kind of thing. You just can't do that within the rules of the EU. It's just too blatant kind of corruption. The way they have their own corruption, but not quite as blatant as I seize your company and give it to my brother-in-law, you know, kind of just crazy stuff. So that was why even the Eastern oligarchs, that again, the Democrats would just totally oversimplify and have you believe are all just slaves of Putin and love him. Not even slaves because they love it so much, whatever. But it's just not right, really. And Manafort explains this so well to Patrick Bet-David what was going on there. So now, bring us back up to November 2013. Manafort is trying to help Yanukovych sign up with the EU. And there's a complicated fight because the Russians are saying if you sign up with the EU, that's going to cost your trade status with us, which might be worth it, but it sure is at least going to be a transition period, right? But then the West is saying, we're only going to loan you a little bit of money, barely enough to roll over your debts and pay your interest on your debt from last year and your previous loans and whatever, just barely enough. And we're demanding massive austerity, meaning you have to slash your pension programs for your elderly and your poor. It's a very poor country anyway. You have to slash your subsidies on fuel. You have to, essentially dismantle your welfare state for your poor and start turning over. This is the American empire, the economic hitman empire at play. You have to start turning over your wheat fields over to Archer Daniels Midland and Cargill and Monsanto, the American-based agribusiness firms. And you're going to turn over your oil resources to our buddies at Chevron and all this kind of stuff, which is a hell of a lot to ask. Meanwhile, Putin's saying, look, don't go with them. Stay with me, and I'll give you $5 billion to start. And while at the same time saying, if you don't, then you're going to have a hard time with your trade with Russia and a hell of a hard transition to the EU. And so it's important to point that out, not because I'm sitting here spinning for the Russian side of the story. I'm just explaining that it was the West that botched the negotiations, and a great authoritative source for that would be Henry Kissinger himself. He told The Guardian that this was all Angela Merkel's fault, the Chancellor of Germany, that she thought she's smart and good at making deals, but she's not. And she drove too hard of a bargain, and so Yanukovych balked and refused to sign. That's when the Maidan revolution began. The day that that happened, that he announced that he was at least postponing it, which they all knew meant the deal's off. When he said that, a guy from a George Soros-backed media organization, whose name I haven't figured out how to pronounce yet because I'm not that far into the audiobook yet, I'm going to totally botch this, but I don't care. Homdratsky TV, something like that. Total like sock puppetry for an AstroTurf organization, right? It'd be like if RT tried to change their name to just another American media company. Yeah, no, you're clearly not that,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it's that, and that leader of that is the one who went on Facebook and said, "Come on, everybody, let's all go down to the Maidan and start a big protest." And then it's just like the Orange Revolution before. We have tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars coming in from. And yes, I don't mind saying I got the footnotes in the book. Everybody can read great journalism. It's no kookery whatsoever. It's great journalism on the subject. Yes, including CIA and MI6 helping run the groundwork in the background behind the scenes in ways that mostly we can't describe, but we do have some good journalism about. But what we can see on the surface of the iceberg is plenty. It's the National Endowment for Democracy, the International Republican Institute, the National Democratic Institute, and a legion of Soros-backed groups and other think tanks equivalent from the Western European allies. And they just poured tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in. And so what they did for all through the winter, the bitter cold winter of all through December, because this really started the very end of November. So all through December, January, and February, they've got heat, they've got food, warm food, hot food. They've got places to sleep. They've got, they brought in these polystyrene foam beds to lay on that are really great insulators from the cold. So you sleep on the cold ground on this sort of rubber board that'll really kind of keep you warm, or not transfer the cold straight up into your ass while you're sleeping anyway. And all of this stuff, tents and all of the things, and a giant stage, endless rock concerts, giant screens to play movies and propaganda, and just keep everybody there. Buses to bring people from all around the western part of the country, all to bring anyone. And look, it's like the best job in town for a lot of people to, get a little bit of money to get on a bus and come and join the protest. And by the way, it's not to sell them short, because it's a very divided country. And there are people, especially in the western part of the country, who very much want to be out from under Russia's shadow and influence as soon as possible, as fast as possible. But it's the furthest thing from unanimity in the country. It's very divided on that question, was very divided at the time. So when they say, oh, it's a popular revolution. Okay, so like if the Pussy Hats had taken over after Trump in a big color-coded revolution and overthrown him, and you would say, okay, it was a popular revolution. And we all know that, well, yeah, the Democrats represent, roughly a third of Americans, just like the Republicans do. So you can say, oh, it's a popular revolution, but 2/3 of the people didn't support it at all. You know what I mean? And probably half of them or more were really against it, but they weren't the ones out in the street, participating in the carnival and not organized enough to try to do anything about it. And you have, this is not, I am as libertarian as can be, as anti-government as can be. So if you are also like that, then you're like, okay, that's fine with me, Scott Horton. But some people might be like, no, you're so libertarian, I can't accept your libertarian take on it, or what, you know what I mean?
Right.
But the book is written by a libertarian. It's not written from libertarian sources any more than it's written from Russian sources or their point of view at all. I essentially am citing our own establishment, our own government and foreign policy establishment and media establishments' own work against them, right? I'm just showing you every time that they admit I'm right against interest. And you could call it confirmation bias if you want, but you know what? Get back to me after you're done reading it and see if that's just confirmation bias or if I'm just righter in hell. And there they say that, oh, I guess Horton is right about this and right about this and right about this, because that's what I'm citing. I did a quick, control F for nyt.com or nytimes.com in my footnotes. And it's like 800 or 500 something. And there's, hundreds and hundreds of citations of the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the Economist, the Telegraph, the Times of London, and all of your, the LA Times, whatever kind of credible sources you need to be able to stand on. That's who I'm citing for you, is good journalism. It's not all like a bunch. And frankly, as long-winded as I am, I don't usually have a lot of philosophical stuff to say or write or a bunch of like opinions. I don't think there's probably hardly any pages in the book other than because of one big block quote or something. There's probably hardly any pages in the book at all that don't have a mess of citations at the bottom, because I'm really not talking to you in the book. I'm really just showing you my note
Right.
cards. I really am just saying, look, I did this giant research project and here's what I found. And I was actually happy to see Amazon review. It was a positive review that said this is really more of a research project than a written work. And I'm like, I'll take that. Like,
Yeah.
He didn't mean it. He meant it in a neutral way.
Correct.
Right? Like he was like admitting that there's a little less storytelling and a little more just showing you throughout the book. But then look, it's 477,000 words of me just showing you. So what can I say? It's already too long anyway without me bloviating anything. I'm really just saying, look, the War Party essentially portrays it like this, but here's why you should understand it my way instead. That's what I do, and I link to all of their claims and their work, so you can check my facts about what I claim they claim. I show all of my work there too. So, hopefully people can see whether I'm being fair to the people that I'm arguing against and the way that I'm portraying their argument as I take it on. But that's what I try to do.
You know what? It makes me think of like the point you're just making there. I'm going to go off on a little tangent, but I think you'll see how it's connected, right? There's so many things that the truth is just out there that you could find in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, from a Victoria Nuland speech. Like it's literally there. The problem is, like, I do home health care 70 hours a week. 99% of the people I know, they just don't really give a shit about government. They just like, hey, I want to go to work. I want to hang out with my family, want to hang out with my friends. And it's amazing to me how if you start to look into things, even just scratching the surface level, you'll see things that are just blatant truths. Like, let me give you one little example. Anytime you mention the name George Soros, people are like, conspiracy theories, this is just nonsense. But it's certainly confirmed that George Soros, both before the revolution and after, had many organizations that he was financing in Ukraine. One of them was called the Anti-Corruption Action Center, I think's the name of it. And you see this woman from it. She's all over the place talking about the corruption of prosecutors that were this guy Victor Shokin, that was fired by Biden at this quid pro quo, etc. Not to get into it too much, but you hear this woman all the time from the Anti-Corruption Action Center. It's like, well, who is this organization? And it turns out they're getting a bunch of money from George Soros. That I was able to find quite easily. But then there was this assertion I read somewhere, and I was like, wait, what? That said that actually these cutouts from the United States were also financing them. And I believe it was John Solomon's reporting said that the State Department of the United States specifically contacted their counterparts in Ukraine and was like, look, we don't want you to prosecute any people from this organization because we're giving them money. And if you think they did something wrong, we assure you it's probably just a misunderstanding. And this guy,
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Check it out. This guy testified in the first impeachment of Trump. His name was George Kent. And he said, no, the original assertions that there was a do not prosecute list is untrue. And yet you could find John Solomon showed the document straight from the U.S. State Department signed by George Kent. Hey, I think there's a misunderstanding.
I should have had that.
It's now this is after that, but what it shows is, and the Obama team, they helped create what was called the NABU, which is sort of the FBI of Ukraine. And it's like this, look, we'll finance all your stuff. We'll help your law enforcement. But like you're saying, it's going to come with some big asks. Just like, and for me, who's a novice, I'm nowhere near the level of you. It sounds similar to like Afghanistan or similar to Iraq or similar to Libya, where these great Western liberators come in, but there's going to be a price. Right? Yeah. You can't have a gold dinar. You're going to have to be backed by the U.S. Western banking system. You're going to have to give a lot of your land and your crops and your resources over. And the story seems, I actually feel terrible for the people of Ukraine, because I feel like on one hand, they have this Russian regime, which I have no love for, that they're living under the shadow. And the only option out of it's, well, to live under the shadow of the United States regime. Right. You know,
and what you're describing there, they call it shared sovereignty, meaning, imperialism. Like neo colonialism, whatever, dude. You can call it what you want. It's the world superpower owning their entire ass, taking over their country. And, I cite in the book Victoria Nuland boasting to Congress that we have just riddled their entire government with American government employees.
Yep. We
run their entire Justice Department and everything else. And it's really incredible to see. But I'm sorry, because I ramble so much and go off on so many different tangents in different directions. I hope I didn't just drive everybody up the wall there.
No,
But let me pick back up with, so the beginning of the protest movement, wait, no, let me first address the Soros point that you made too. There's a lot of Soros in my book, based mostly, and I have a lot of different stuff, but I want to give credit here to Mark McKinnon, who is a journalist from the Toronto Global, the Toronto Globe and Mail.
okay.
That's what it is, Globe and Mail. And he wrote a book called The New Cold War. And he is the planet's foremost chronicler of the color-coded revolutions. You'll love the book. I mean, it is fantastic. And I am only like skittish that I quoted him too much. I hope he doesn't get mad that I just cite him so much in the book. He did a magnificent job on this thing. And he is very sympathetic to the color-coded revolutions. He's saying, look, in many cases, the Western chosen leaders are less worse than the Eastern chosen ones. And he's very sympathetic with a lot of the protesters who he's like covering in real life and are very real to him and clearly have their wishes, that he honors in his own way. And yet there's just no question about what's going on here. This is what's going on here. It's just straight news reporting. There's no bias in it. And in fact, a lot of people say, oh, it's anti-Semitism that would lead people to criticize George Soros. But in fact, McKinnon himself seems to falsely attribute criticism of some of the worst Russian gangsters to anti-Semitism, rather than the fact that they're some of the worst Russian gangsters. So in other words, he's the type to maybe use that accusation too loosely.
Right.
He certainly is not the type to say something anti-Semitic about George Soros, or to be motivated by anti-Semitism to say something about George Soros. He's a perfectly decent guy, Mark McKinnon, a perfectly decent journalist from a major paper. He doesn't mean any harm like that. And in fact, by the way, I think this is very important. The modern hate Soros movement is really some pro-Israeli astroturf.
Right.
Because as Jewish as he may be, he is not a Zionist, and he's certainly not some right-wing Likudnik who wants to see Israel conquer all of the West Bank and Gaza Strip and all of this horror show. He's never been like that. And so it's American far right-wing Zionist Jews, essentially, who have built this, Josh Hammer and people like this, who are building this sort of astroturf hate Soros movement. Oh, by the way, he's done plenty to earn hate, especially by supporting prosecutors who are soft on violent felons of all things. Doesn't everyone want them to legalize victimless crimes and lift all the fines and fees for offenses against state edicts where you didn't really do anything to anyone? We all want that. What do? They double on all that stuff, but then they release violent felons. These progressives are just crazy. And damn Soros for doing that. And he learned a lot he earned a lot of direct heat for doing that real stuff. On the other hand, there's also a bunch of Likudniks who demonize him because he's more reasonable on Israel.
Well, it's just real quick, I'll just say it's one of those things, and you see it with the establishment all the time, where they find, they'll take the most extreme version of a serious criticism, and then they use that to label everyone, right? So to make it real simple for people, if you're like, I don't think we should be funding Israel with Israel-Palestine, oh, so then you're an anti-Semite. Well, no, I didn't say that at all. I have no love for the Palestinian people or Hamas. I just don't think we should be involved. It's the same with this. Anytime you make a legitimate criticism of look, there's this organization that was backed by U.S. State Department dollars, cutouts, in Ukraine, and Soros was backing a lot of them too, and they have an agenda. You could agree with that agenda or not, and there's problems with that from the perspective of how certain people look at it, and they're just like, oh, you said George Soros, ha ha ha. And to me, it's just laughable because it's the most intellectually dishonest thing to do. It's not that I completely believe you when you say it has nothing to do with anti-Semitism or even a personal dislike of George Soros. It's the idea that he is this outside wealthy billionaire who has a stake in reforming countries and a vision that he seeks to have them look like, and the problems that comes to that if the U.S. State Department's involved with that as well. Nothing to do with...
That's such an important point, man, because listen, the world is lousy with billionaires. The United States is lousy with billionaires. Not all of them are political like this. Right. This particular man this Hungarian-American billionaire has staked out his claim as an international mover and shaker, not just in business, but in politics, big time, including when communism is still there. You know, people nowadays, they call him a Marxist and a communist. That's mostly name calling. What he actually is he's a center-left anti-communist Democrat. He is like a Harry Truman Democrat. He is not a left-wing Marxist. He hates communism. And that's his hatred for communism has lasted and turned into this enduring hatred of Russia as well. Even though communism is gone, he's still up to the same old thing against them. So that would be the better way to understand him. He's not a commie pinko. He's Hillary Clinton. And I'm sorry, because that's also not the way to understand Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Hillary Clinton is Bill Clinton. Is that clear? Right? The guy that burned Waco and expanded the empire? That guy, he's not a commie hippie liberal. He's a right-wing Democrat. One more click and he's George W. Bush, right? And essentially that's who, that's the way to understand George Soros as well and his view. And by the way, like you can, and of course, I have all the citations in the book. I wouldn't go and make claims and not show you the work here. And you can see where, and anyone can Google this right now and pull it up in no time flat, is he did an interview in 1995 in the New Yorker magazine with a journalist named Connie Bruck, B-R-U-C-K, where he takes credit for rigging the Ukrainian election of 1994 for his buddy Kuchma. This is the guy who would now be considered the pro-Russian candidate against the Western one. But in this case, that was what George Soros wanted back in 1994. Then he was deeply involved in 2004, and then he's deeply involved again in 2014. I'm sorry, pal. It ain't my fault that he was there, and it ain't my fault that all these years end in 4, and none of this is because of me and because of anti-Semitism. This is just the history of the world since the end of the Cold War, and he played a major role in it, and he's happy to boast about it, and all of his colleagues in the State Department and the rest of the government are happy to describe the influence and the power that he has as sort of an adjunct of the U.S. State Department in accomplishing American goals, particularly in Europe and with the color-coded revolutions. So that's all just true, and I hope that people take it in its proper spirit. And so now, during this whole winter, essentially the leaders of the protest movement, the self-appointed leaders, are Arseny Yatsenyuk, who's from the Fatherland Party, which is close to Yulia Tymoshenko, the gas princess from Ukr-Nafta, is what it's called, or something like that, the major gas concern. They called her the gas princess, Yulia Tymoshenko. She's the one with the Princess Leia hair, always with the braids. Used to be pretty, you know. Then there's Tannybach, and Tannybach was from the Svoboda Party, which used to be the Social Nationalists. And he's the guy where if you put his name in Google Images, you see him giving the Hitler salute with some SS lightning bolts behind him and stuff, because these guys are literally the descendants of those who served Hitler in the Second World War. Now, that's kind of a whole other story, but I give the whole backstory in the book for people interested in that. These are, you know, he's an extremely far right-wing guy. And then the other major leader was a guy named Klitschko, and there's two brothers, and this is Vitaly, I think this one is Vitaly Klitschko, and he later became the mayor, and he's a famous heavyweight boxer. Yep. And he was from the Udar Party, which I think is, you know, essentially Ukrainian nationalist, but not nearly as far right as Tannybach, but he's like one of the big three leaders there. And so these three are sort of the mascots of the revolution, basically, and the leaders of the negotiations. But meanwhile, out there in the square, there's thousands of people, and including, especially more and more as time goes on, far right-wing nationalist groups from especially the west of the country. And now, so let me disclaim to your audience here a little bit. I know everybody is sick and tired of hearing everybody on the right be called a Nazi, and especially right now. Right? Like you could have Klansmen on horseback riding around a black man's house, and then someone would be like, oh my God, racists. And everybody else would be like, oh, shut up.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Because we're just so tired of hearing that word.
Yep.
We're so tired of hearing, oh, you're a Nazi. Oh, you're a fascist. I hope people understand I'm making a joke there with the thing. It would help the black guy. Anyway, but the point is people are just so tired of that. And I want to acknowledge that. And then beg your forgiveness as I try your patience and say, these guys are Nazis, man. And I mean, their grandfathers served Hitler literally and helped him implement the Holocaust in the Second World War. And these are the same groups who last in different forms, and including some of the very same men and their sons and grandsons who lasted through the Cold War generations and were the ones who they came back from exile at the end of the Cold War, and they got a big boost with the Orange Revolution in '04 and a much bigger boost in '14. And they came out into the street. And let me rewind just a little bit to should be a touchstone for people. I think certainly my generation, I just heard of this when I was a kid plenty of times. I presume that this is kind of pop culture understanding for people who are interested at all in World War II, would be that you've heard of this before. I know you have. When the Nazis came in the East, some people greeted them as liberators because they had been controlled by the Soviet Union, communists, in the lead up to that. And they hated living as slaves under communism so bad that when the German Nazis came, they said, hooray. And then, especially the way we always hear the story is, and then they later regretted it because, boy, the Nazis didn't care about them, only about themselves. And they were just in worse trouble. And of course, then the Soviets won the war. So anybody who sided with the Nazis when the Nazis came, boy, they are even worse trouble after that. So am I touchstoning on a touchstone that you're people familiar with this?
Yep.
This is what happened. This is part of Ukraine's history from the war. They had suffered terribly under communism. Then some of them sided with the Nazis. And then the Nazis killed like 800,000 Jews in the Holocaust in Ukraine. Even before they really built the death camps, they're just rounding them up and shooting them and dropping them in pits and stuff for years over there. It was really ugly. And there were certain factions, especially in the far west of the country, who had participated in that and were groups. You know, it was part of that. You've also probably heard of like Operation Gladio in Western Europe and the Stay Behind programs. And that meant America backing right-wing groups across Europe, especially Western Europe is what's more familiar to people. In case the Soviets invaded Western Europe, we would have right-wing militias, stay behind militias, ready to launch an insurgency against them, right? Well, we also backed right-wing groups on the Soviet side of the line, such as in Ukraine. These same groups, the OUN, UPA, they were backed by the CIA and the U.S. Army, you know, Special Intelligence Division, whatever the hell thing it was called, and backed them until 1959. In an insurgency against the Soviet Union there. And sort of in a corollary to what we're doing now, right? Just feeding these guys into a grinder, giving them enough backing to keep fighting, but never to win. What
right.
They was dying. But then again, there are a bunch of Nazis anyway, so who cares? Not this time, but that time. This time there are some Nazis, but not that the whole Ukrainian army is. But those insurgent fighters were back then. But anyway, so these are the same kind of groups. And then at the end of the Cold War, and then there have been a bunch of exiles who were all connected with them that lived in the U.S. and Canada especially. And when the Cold War ended, they all went home and started to, you know, bring this this whole political culture back and to try to rewrite history to say, no, we fought the Nazis and the commies and we saved the Jews and all of this stuff, which was not true. But they tried to they don't have a George Washington. So they tried to make one out of this guy, Stepan Bandera, who was nothing but horrible,
right?
You know, absolute fascist, and all of his guys. But they're like, well, that's the best they can do. They don't have any real heroes to make heroes out of. So at least mostly they try to lie about him and say he wasn't that bad. Sometimes they go, no, he killed lots of Jews. That was what was great about him. And then they're caught again. You know what I mean? But anyway, so these groups are important because they were a significant percentage of the groups on the street there. And they were the ones who finally accomplished the putsch on February the 21st there. So what happened is people often call it a coup, and short for coup d'etat. And there's a coup d'etat and a coup de main and a coup de this and that. If you're a Frenchman, you know what all that stuff means. I know a coup de main is like when Saddam just rolls right into Kuwait and it's over, or when Putin has his sailors and Marines just stand outside and declare that Crimea belongs to them again. That's a coup de main.
Okay.
One big surprise attack or one big surprise move and over and done, right? A coup d'etat is when your chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff shoots you in the head and replaces you, right? That kind of thing, right? Okay, so this is what they call a putsch, P-U-S-T-C-H, which means a bunch of crazy right-wingers rioting in the street and you run like hell, Okay, that's my translation. And so that was what happened, was they tried to make a deal. The Americans and the Europeans and the Russians insisted, Vladimir Putin himself insisted, that Yanukovych sign this deal, where he promised to hold early elections and to pull his police forces back as long as the rioters and the protesters would also pull their people back and their violent forces back, which is a stupid deal because there's only a few, but still no one really in charge out there, right? Like,
Right.
you can say, all right, it's not like Denzel Washington telling the Muslims, all right, about face, everybody march, right? Like, there's nobody,
Right.
that's not happening, right? So they don't go anywhere. And when the big three protest leaders announce the New Deal, the real Nazis run up there and say, forget that. And then one of them, his name is Parasyuk, and we know he admitted and bragged about it, and all different sources say he was the one leading the snipers from the music conservatory that morning. Same guy, leader of the 100, he said, runs up there and says, listen, we refuse to accept this. The deal is off. If the president doesn't leave by 10 o'clock in the morning, we're going to go there and kill him. I swear to God. And then the New York Times and everybody else goes, hey, this was a credible threat, man. They had the guns, and the other side, the police, didn't have the force. And then it's a little confusing. There's different reporting about exactly what happened, but seemingly the heads of the chiefs of the security forces just left town. Then the lower down guys were like, well, forget this. And they all got on buses and left too. So now all of downtown's wide open. They didn't just pull their police back from the Maidan. They just left the capital city, basically. And there are different versions of Yanukovych's flight. The immediate reporting was that he simply fled because he knew these guys were coming to kill him. And he just fled and left town. And I have no idea. I'm not saying this guy's exactly credible because he's a horrible guy.
Right.
But this is stupid enough that I kind of believe it. Just sounds kind of like what a government employee would do.
Yeah.
He said that Yanukovych had a previously scheduled meeting out of town. And he just left town to go to the meeting that morning, not recognizing that the body language there was of ultimate total surrender and capitulation and surrender of power. By leaving the capital city today, like this morning, you're leaving the capital city, really? And he up and left. So that's what Sikorsky says, the foreign minister of Poland. I don't know if that's really true, but that was at least one explanation for how he was he kind of half did it to himself there. I mean, certainly he screwed himself by agreeing to that stupid agreement that he couldn't enforce and made no real sense. And then as soon as he fled, John Kerry came and recognized the new government immediately as the legitimate government of the country, and all the other Western powers followed suit and the rest. So, and I'm sorry because I go so slow when I get bogged down in my details.
Perfectly fine. I love it.
So the way to understand now, listen, your audience has heard a million times that, like, okay, you're right. This doesn't start yesterday. This doesn't start in 22. It starts in 14 when Putin seized Crimea. No, it was the revolution before that. So here's what led to the seizure of Crimea was first there was this weird bus attack where a bunch of Crimeans who had taken buses up to Kiev to do like a counter protest, they lost. So they got on their buses to try to go home, and they got intercepted by right sector, that some of the fascists at a roadblock who basically kicked their ass. I don't think they killed any of them, but they basically beat them up and threatened them and said, go home, you Russians, and all of this stuff. And so maybe one of them was killed or something. But anyway, so that was kind of a big public relations thing there. Problem in the Crimean Peninsula, and new extra division there. But then the next thing was all of the former presidents, Kravchuk, Kuchma, Yushchenko, all wrote a letter, and Yushchenko all wrote a joint letter saying now is the time to cancel the Kharkiv Pact and kick Russia out of the Sevastopol naval base on the Crimean Peninsula. And it was only then, and I guess I'll stop and say, well, there's a whole complicated history behind it, but just understand that it's an extremely important naval base to the Russians. It's belonged to them since Catherine the Great in the days before our Constitution was even ratified in the 1780s. And anyone could have told you that they'll be damned before they give it up. They're just not going to. And so they said, now let's kick the Russians out of that naval base. And only then, Putin says he planned on doing it before. Maybe he did. But it was on the timeline. It was only after that that he ordered his sailors and Marines to go stand outside with their rifles. As I learned as a young man from a guy who was in the Marine Corps Force Recon, you don't own anything until your guy is standing on the corner with a rifle. Well, that was what they did. They stood around with rifles. It was theirs. And so that was the big coup de main. Only 4 people were killed, tragically. But anyway, that was essentially that. But see, then it caused a real problem because, I should mention, they held amounts to a phony plebiscite simply because of the power shift on the ground in reality. I think the numbers were actually pretty accurate, honestly. Pew and Gallup, among others, verified the numbers later. So maybe it was a little bit high, but essentially there was something like a supermajority of Crimeans voted on a nebulously worded thing that said, well, we're going to seek independence. Then they changed it at the end to we're going to join with Russia. They got certainly, and look, that's not exactly fair to the minority that didn't want to change sovereignty, but I mean, what are you going to do? It's a giant piece of land, and the question is which sovereignty controls it. You have a super majority wants to change. It might be worse to make them stay in the old sovereignty, right? Like, you can debate about this, but it's not so cut and dry for Ukraine's side, that's for sure. And in the book, I won't waste your time, but in the book, I go through the history of Russian control of the peninsula and that naval base, and especially all of the different controversies since Ukrainian independence from the Soviet Union at the fall of the Soviet Union at the end of 1991. And I take you all the way through all the different controversies over just how much control Ukraine has over the peninsula and how much control Russia has over that, to them, extremely important naval base there. So, but now once that happened, now the new junta in Kiev, backed by the United States, they kind of panic. And when the eastern portions of the country, protesters come out and start seizing government buildings there and refusing to recognize the authority of the new regime that had overthrown their elected president, then America, in the form of Barack Obama, sent John Brennan, who you already know is the leader of al-Qaeda in Syria in those days, and the guy who framed Trump for treason in Russiagate later. He sent Brennan over there to instruct them to launch a war, to launch a civil war. And at the time, and look, there were Russians who were like spies or, agents or deniable kind of operatives who were helping to lead some of this stuff. Well, mostly they were late to the party. This was essentially a domestic thing, just like the Americans. Boy, you talk about the level of influence the West put in on the side of the Maidan revolution. It makes this stuff pale in comparison by a million times as far as Russian influence with the protesters in the East. But so far, there have been no acts of war. All they had done, the worst thing that they had done was seize the intelligence building, the SVB intelligence headquarters. But they didn't kill anyone when they seized it. They just kind of took it over, right? But Barack Obama and John Brennan said, go to war. And they launched a civil war. And then, of course, what happened? That just made everything worse. That just drove more people into the senator's hands. Half the military dissented and split and went to the other side. And then what'd they do? They went and recruited the Nazis and sent the Nazis to go fight because they didn't have enough soldiers yet. So they needed a bunch of Hitler-loving Nazis to go and do their dirty work in the meantime, which of course meant horrific war crimes and the rest, because that's who they are and that's how they behave. And so that was the start of the war. And in that first year from April 2014 through February 2015, something like 9,000 people were killed in the first year of the war there on both sides. Then they finally had the Minsk II deal by February of 15. That changed it into what they call low-level fighting, where they pulled back the heavier armaments. They ceased the airstrikes and toned the war down. So now you only have hundreds of people being killed every year instead of thousands and thousands every year. But it amounted to another about 4,000 people over the next 7 years in the lead up to the War of 22. And now, look, man, I have to say here, and forgive me because I do a lot of interviews. If I already said this a minute ago, then just stop me. But I don't think I did. But I think it's important because I have to assume, in a charitable way, not to be a jerk about it, but like in an honest way, there have to be people listening to me now who are just saying to themselves, there's no way anyone could be this convincing about the other side of the story unless they were on the other side telling that story. But that's just not right, okay? I'm a Texan. And like, quite frankly, Texas is really big. I'm a Central Texan. Like, that's my home country, right? Like, I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm an American. I'm a Texas and an American patriot. But I'm not an Eastern European patriot, not Ukraine or Russia. I couldn't possibly be. I'm from here, and my interests are purely parochial. I'm like a Ron Paul,
Yep.
you know, and more, maybe I'm more of a Pat Buchanan. I'm like Republic, not Empire guy here. So none of this has to do with accusing America, and it has everything to do with accusing the Bushes and the Clintons, McCain and Biden of screwing us all, of being horrible on everything. If you're so partisan that you can't stand to hear a word said against the Bushes or something, well, then I cry for you. But like,
Yep.
you know, these people, John McCain, this is the worst American who ever lived, probably. Thank God he never obtained the presidency. And I don't know any conservatives who ever loved him. Conservatives always hated him. He's horrible on everything. Why do the media love him? Oh, he's a maverick. What does that mean? It means he's a damn Democrat.
Right.
In the very worst fashion, the very worst kind of, again, like a George Soros, all the way to the right, but still a Democrat as you could be. Democrat, center-right, anti-communist, interventionist, Democrat. And yet the Soviet Union's gone. We made friends with the Chi-Coms back in the early 70s. The Soviet Union completely ceased to exist. You know, Russian communism hadn't been around at all since Christmas Day 1991. And so what use do we got for anti-communism now other than trying to keep them out of our kids' schools and whatever, right? Like, what, this has nothing to do with foreign policy. Putin's not a communist. Putin is what? Think about where he fits on the political spectrum. He's a center-right conservative Republican,
right.
right? He's not a fascist or a Nazi. He's at war, but hey, American Republicans go to war a lot too.
Yep.
He's not a fascist. And look, there are ethnic nationalists in Russia. There absolutely are. He purely establishes himself as a believer in multi-ethnic democracy in Russia. Now, look, he's a strong man, been in power for 25 years. I'm no fool, and I'm not asking you to be, but I'm saying, as far as, you know, democracy, regular elections, and change of power, he's a very strong man. He's not exactly a dictator, and what he is certainly not is an ethnic Russian chauvinist at the expense of other ethnicities or religious sects or whoever in his country, in terms of Muslims or Jews or whoever who don't fit as just classic ethnic Russian Orthodox Christians. He is absolutely not a far right winger on those issues at all. And the Russian Nazis who are like that, they're horrific. They behead people and commit horrific acts of terrorism. They're like the worst kinds of Nazis that you would ever have in American history here. And he kicks their ass and locks them in prison. What's he supposed to do? He's not one of them. He's not like that at all. That's what people say.
They rewrite history. Like Navalny, right? Who was he jailed? He's like actually said a lot of stuff that the left would be furious about, right? Like racial stuff, you know.
And he is, and in fact, I'm so grateful that you brought that up. This is the Americans' idea. This is Hillary Clinton's idea of how to fix Russia, is to back a guy like Alexei Navalny, who, as you absolutely correctly identify him, is far to the right of Putin, was an absolute ethnic Russian nationalist. What Americans, certainly anyone on the left would say without any irony whatsoever, is a Nazi, a fascist. Like, I'm not saying he's all the way a fascist, but he's certainly an ethnic nationalist, and like, those lines get pretty blurry when you get that far to the right, man. And the Americans' idea was, we'll give him a bunch of money, or at least we'll give the liberals a bunch of money to run around with him and hold a big protest, because the liberal protest isn't big enough and a right-wing nationalist protest isn't big enough. But maybe if we pour some money in there, we can bring them together and hold a protest that's big enough to what? To drive Putin crazy? To make him absolutely hate your guts and swear revenge? Because you're not going to accomplish anything better than that. And I'm talking to Hillary Clinton here. Right. This is the snow revolution of 2011. Her and Michael McFaul messing around over there. what kind of flavor crack are they smoking? They're not going to get away with a color revolution in Moscow. Have you ever seen the size of that red brick wall
Yep.
they keep around the Kremlin?
Yep.
You're not getting away with 1917. Are you insane? So then what's the point, right? It's like me coming up to you and smacking you in the face a few times. Like, wait a minute, where is the profit in this, Scott? Because, like, this guy's about to fight you. Like, how much longer are we going to go on before this starts getting contrary to your interests here, you know?
And
It's
that's what
insane to do this.
I think you make a great point, right? Where because I come from basically the same position as you. I was in the debate circuit when I was like in my 20s in 2003, 2004. I was a Ron Paul guy. So all these debate people were super lefties, and they thought like my libertarian-esque economics was like nonsensical. But at least I was against the war. I was against the Iraq war, so they could deal with me there, right? And that's sort of where I've been. I'm tired of us being involved in these things over and over. One of the debates I have with people all the time is, I'm willing for someone to just be an American chauvinist and say, I don't give a shit if we exploit other countries, so be it. I'm open to hearing that argument. The problem I have is this. There are two different arguments going on. There is, should the United States be the hegemon? Is the world better off with like a world police superpower hegemon? Like in theory. And secondly, in practice, with the people that are currently running our military and intelligence, are they people that we trust with that? And I think the answer is a resounding no, not just with incompetence, but with corruption. Like, for example, the story I tell people all the time, and again, I'm just a normal guy. If you look at our situation in Syria, which I think has a lot to do with Russia's distrust of the United States, we're told that we need to perpetually be in Syria to fight ISIS, which means we have to partner with Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra, which back home we're told we have to violate our Fourth Amendment rights because these groups are so bad. But we have to stay in Syria perpetually because if we leave, our ally the Turks, where we station nuclear weapons, will commit genocide against our allies the Kurds. So we have to, because we've given nuclear weapons to Turkey and we're honor bound to defend them, we can't leave another foreign country where we're violating their sovereignty because our allies will commit genocide against our other allies. Oh, but Russia doesn't have the right to be pissed about that, and neither does Assad. This is just one surface level of our foreign policy. You could do the same story in Libya. And so for me, my answer to all of this as someone who doesn't have time to like delve into this is to say like, look, there's a lot of shitty situations. There's strongmen leaders. There's ethnic rivalries. There's historical conflicts that have gone back 2,000 years. The United States needs to stay out of it. We should not be funding Russia or Ukraine in this situation. And what we're doing is creating a meat grinder as far as I'm concerned. And I have a friend who I stream with a lot who's been stationed in Ukraine for over a year now. He loves the Ukrainian people. I'm sympathetic to him. And I'm like, let me tell you how the story ends. The people of Ukraine get screwed over at the end. Just like the people of Libya, just like the people of Afghanistan. They're the ones that are going to die. People in the United States are going to pay, average people like me that can't afford their groceries anymore. They're going to be told to sacrifice more while their government enriches themselves and their allies across the world. And the only people that win are military-industrial complex people, the politicians in this country, and hell, I think even politicians in Russia will end up better off for this because they'll entrench power more, and they're going to end up getting some sort of political victory for this at the end. And so that's the story. Like, it's so hard, though, because the propaganda is so easy that just Russia are just these horrible, grotesque, evil people running that country, and they're the bad guys, and Ukraine, Zelensky's, like Lord of the Rings, he's Aragorn, and he's fighting this noble battle. And so...
You know what, though? About a year ago or a year and a half ago, a guy on Twitter said to me, he goes, man, you need to change the subtitle of your book. Because I already like claiming dibs. I was terrified someone's going to publish a book called Provoked before I could get mine done. Because it's such an obvious and awesome title for a book about this, right? So I was talking about it, and the guy said, no, you got to change the subtitle. Because the subtitle was how America started the new Cold War with Russia and the catastrophe in Ukraine. And he said, no. Change America to Washington.
Right.
Because people are going to misunderstand what you mean by that. But we know what you mean by Washington. That's just short code for the U.S. federal government and its elected president, supposedly elected president, whoever that is. We know what that means. And it's even kind of weird because it's like, it's not parallel. It's not how they started the new Cold War with Moscow, because that doesn't quite sound right either.
Right.
So I had to leave it how Washington, the city, started the new Cold War with Russia, the country, even though, whatever. But even though that's a little clumsy in its own right that way with the asymmetry there, it's still important to say that, like, look, man, as it should ring in your ear, Washington ain't America.
Right.
Washington's just Washington. And like to even narrow it down further, the Bushes and Clintons and McCain and Biden, they're not America either. Even if somehow Lindsey Graham, I don't know how, was able by hook and crook and corruption and payoffs to get elected to the U.S. Senate in South Carolina over and over and over again. I'm sorry. I just can never do enough drugs to make me believe in popular sovereignty enough to believe that Lindsey Graham then therefore somehow is the expression of America
Correct.
itself, is America, and that his preferences are what America wants. That's not right. It just doesn't stick. America is a gigantic place full of 350 million people, and I happen to be quite fond of it.
Right.
And that's why I hate our national government so much, because they clearly are the greatest threat to our life and liberty. So I hope people can take it in the proper spirit that, Bill Clinton, Jeffrey Epstein's friend, who beat the crap out of Juanita Broderick and savagely bit her on the face as he raped her. Yeah, well, that guy also made bad decisions in regards to his Middle Eastern and Eastern European policy. Right. Are you with me? Like, that's all we're talking about here. George Bush, who possibly people in your audience think of him as at least a decent guy. He didn't mistreat his wife the way Bill Clinton did. You know what I mean? He has some honor on at least a personal basis, right? He's friendly to his butler, unlike Hillary, the devil, right? But come on, he was really unwise, right? Yep. I won't even call him stupid. How about he was very unwise?
Well, let me real quick.
Terrible choices a lot of the times.
Real quick, let me ask you about, like, the most interesting part of the Tucker interview with Putin was when Putin said that he at one point had this conversation with Obama where he was like, I would be interested in coming on with, like, the EU or NATO. I would sort of be interested in becoming more friendly. And he claimed to Tucker that Obama seemed open to it. But basically, once he got back and talked to his handlers, they were like, no. Do you see some truth in that maybe some people like Bush, even Obama, or maybe even Clinton, that like at the end of the day, it's like Washington gonna Washington. It don't matter what some individual president wants to do. These people that are really running the show behind the scenes, they don't want that sort of relationship. They like the conflict.
Yeah. Well, I cannot verify that anecdote from any American sources that I've ever heard of, that particular one. But yes, overall, it can be extremely difficult, even for a president like W. Bush, who, I'm not sure exactly what all of Washington thought of him, but it didn't really matter because of the power that Dick Cheney had. He was sophisticated enough of an operator in Washington that he ensconced, especially the neoconservative faction, in proper positions that what he said went. They were able to really do what they wanted in a lot of ways. On the other hand, were there places where, certainly later, mostly for the good, there were places where the establishment, the permanent government resisted him. Like, for example, he really wanted to gin up an excuse to attack Iran in 2007, and the CIA debunked him and said they're not making nuclear weapons. There goes your pretext for a war, pal, and undermined him in that case. In the case of Donald Trump, there's a great statement in the New York Times Magazine, in this great piece by Keith Gesson about the quiet Russia hands, the quiet Americans, the Russia hands who do our Russia policy. And they say in there about Trump and regarding him being hamstrung by Russiagate especially, they say, well, so the president's like the captain of a ship and he's got his hands on the wheel, but it's not connected to anything. Right? And so there's the Congress's policy and there's the executive branch's policy and there's the president's policy, but the president's policy doesn't really affect the executive branch's policy. And back to what you said about, to connect to sort of where we started here with Ukraine Gate. Look at what happened with Ukraine Gate, where the germ of it was a guy named Alexander Vindman, who's a foreign national, somehow posing as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army. I don't know how in the world that happened. Him and his twin brother, I don't know his twin brother's rank. His twin brother is now in the U.S. House, if you can believe that crap. Or it's going to be. But so this guy, he said that Donald Trump had clearly crossed the brightest red line in the way that he handled this so-called perfect phone call between Trump and Zelensky and severely implying and pretending to believe that Trump had outright extorted Zelensky and said, I demand that you launch a criminal investigation into a man who I hereby claim to agree with the world is innocent of any crime, just to hurt him for my political career, and in exchange I'll get you missiles. Well, that's not what the phone call said at all, but that was the way Vindman spun it. And then he gave it to this guy Eric Chiaramella, who was
Are you allowed to say his name now?
yeah, right. I hope I don't get you kicked off of YouTube. So he had been on the National Security Council with Vindman, but it got kicked off for leaking against Trump and had gone back to CIA. Not fired, didn't have to go get a real job, but just had to go back to CIA. So Vindman leaks to him, and he's the one who issues the whistleblower complaint, and that's what kicks off the whole Ukraine Gate thing. But here's the important point that I want to emphasize, and I'd really like to ask your audience to verify this, follow up on this, because I'll be happy and excited knowing the emotions that you're going to go through when you read this stuff yourself with your own eyeballs, and don't take my word for it. Let's go back. You probably watched the YouTube of the thing. But certainly you can read his testimony, Vindman that is, and his article in the Atlantic magazine that he wrote all about it as well. And I'm pretty tightly paraphrasing him here, where he says repeatedly that Donald Trump, the president of the United States of America, was trying to change our Russia policy. He was trying to change our Ukraine policy.
Yep.
Our Ukraine policy, meaning Lieutenant Colonel Vindman's Ukraine policy. Him and the Deputies Committee of the National Security Council, the interagency. That's where the third-ranking guys meet to coordinate what the bosses of the different agencies have decided under the direction of the President of the United States. Well, here, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman says repeatedly the president had no right to do this. How dare Donald Trump change? Let me tell you something. Me and all of the guys at the interagency, we had already worked out what America's Ukraine and Russia policy was. Now, who the hell does this guy think he is, this guy Trump, think he is to change it? We had to stop him. And then the obvious and almost like mumbled, not quite unspoken end of the statement is, therefore I trumped up this crap about the phone call. Right? That's the whole point. You can read him in his own words. He says our foreign policy. He's not talking about America. He's talking about him and his friends 3 or 4 ranks down in the executive branch dictating to the president of the United States. They can't believe that he thinks for a minute he has the authority to tell them what to do. They're the U.S. government. Who the hell is he?
Yep. Yeah. It wasn't just, by the way, he's the most significant of it. But I think there was this woman from the State Department that testified, Yovanovitch was maybe her name. She kept saying our foreign policy, our Ukrainian policy. And I said during the impeachment, I was live streaming, I was like, look at the arrogance. The State Department feels like Donald Trump came in and they were like, can you believe this guy's stepping on our toes? Like he needs to shut up. It's surreal. I know your time's precious. I could talk to you for 8 hours. So I just wanted to give one final chance here to shout out your book. So again, my guest today, Scott Horton, wrote Provoked, How Washington Started the New Cold War with Russia and the Catastrophe in Ukraine. Can you tell us the best place to find your book? And maybe if you got any more interviews or debate coming up that people could tune in for the next week or so.
Yeah, sure. So it's just at Amazon, and the Kindle version is there as well. They're not linked together because I had to make one slight change and they got unlinked, but the Kindle is there if you look, if you're a Kindle guy. If you stop by my website, scotthorton.org first, then that's my custom link. I'll get an extra little kickback from that probably, or the pinned tweet on at Scott Horton Show on X there. The top pinned tweet, if you follow that link, I'll probably get an extra little kickback from Amazon side of the sale there. But otherwise, I'm perfectly happy if people just go to Amazon and get it. And very proud to say that Ron Paul and John Mearsheimer and Judge Napolitano and a lot of other greats said that it was not bad. So awesome. So that's pretty good. And then, I have a show at scotthorton.org. I got 6,000 interviews going back to 1999. Really just one from 99. The rest are from 2003 on. That's all at scotthorton.org, 6,000 something of them. And then I'm at the Libertarian Institute. I'm the director of the Institute, and I've got an incredible team of guys and a couple of gals that just do really great work on the blog and their articles and a bunch of really great podcasts, especially on foreign policy, but also on everything else too. And it's really great stuff. That's at libertarianinstitute.org. And I won't burden you with any more. I'm at Scott Horton Show on Twitter, guys.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Hopefully we'll talk soon. And I can't wait to see you dunk on more of these fools like you were on Piers Morgan there the other day. It's always enjoyable.
Thank you, man.
All right, man. You have a good one. Thanks so much. All right. Great interview. What a man. I cannot wait to read the book. I think it's going to be tremendous. Thanks again to Conservative Carnage for helping set that interview up. Scott's going to send me a copy of his book. I'm going to read it. I'll do my best to keep it in my brain, get the sources, so when I'm doing these debates, I'll have more direct information. I think Scott's doing exactly what we need more people to do, which is so many people just rely, myself included, whether it be because we're lazy, but because we have lives, because you don't have time to look into everything. You sort of rely on someone giving you the best points of something. Thanks so much for the subscription, Ranger and Rogue. You rely on someone to give you the best points on some of these things. And oftentimes what you find is if you sit down and read stuff for yourself, you can see that there's all sorts of things that are confirmed just nonchalantly in mainstream media outlets, interviews, statements, like things that Victoria Nuland said, or I was mentioning George Kent, that said about the Anti-Corruption Action Center. And as Scott was saying there, just the admissions of sort of Westerners talking about, well, this is what was going on with sort of the Maidan revolution, etc. Yeah, his debate with Bill Kristol, I haven't seen that one. I'll have to check it out. So I'm so happy. Let me give you a little inside baseball as me conducting interviews just for a second. I never know what to do. I felt like Scott maybe would have been cool talking another hour, but I told him an hour. I told his people behind the scenes an hour, and I don't want him to feel like he has to say, hey, I need to get out of here. I don't think that's a fair burden to put on him. So I hope he doesn't feel that I rushed him out. I feel like there's always, because in a show like mine, it's not like a radio show. It's not a television show. So like if you're doing Piers Morgan, okay, we're going to be here for an hour and then the show's going to end. But for my show where it's like, I'll probably be streaming for another 2-3 hours here, we could have kept going. And so I really hope Scott understands, and I'll make sure I email him and his team and let him know. I wasn't trying to kick him out or anything. I would have sat here and talked to him all night. I could have went another 4 hours. I'd have so many questions, but I think that he really gave a great in-depth answer to the specific question that I had about the 2014 revolution and how that leads to 2022. And I think that's amazing. That's something that I appreciate hearing those details quite amazingly. I had questions about all sorts of things, about our policies in Syria, about NATO expansion in general, about the biolabs that we were working with in Ukraine, and whether or not that had anything to do with Russia. So I can't wait to read the book because I'm sure he covers so much of that, and I think it'll be amazing. But yeah, I could have listened to him talk. I know he said he thought he was being long-winded. I'm long-winded when I talk. I don't give a shit. That's what I like hearing, and I love the details and the passion that's coming through with him. So I can't wait to read the book, and I can't wait to hopefully absorb some of that knowledge and be able to understand sort of when I'm talking about these issues, have a deeper understanding of it. So for the rest of the show here today, I thought we would do a call-in show. So I figure we can go until 10 o'clock or so. So if people are interested in that, let me get my Discord up. We'll start with that. But yeah, I couldn't be happier with how that interview went. Also got to talk about planes, trains, and automobile. It'll be nice when we clip that out. First thing you'll hear is me talking about John Candy, talking about Steve Martin's balls. So that's always nice. So let's see. Let's go here. So, and I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you so much to the Crucible for the raid. Always nice to get a raid from the fine folks at the Crucible. Let me make sure I read Super Chats first. To anyone who donated on any of my platforms while I was...
Yep. So I just...
Oops, wrong. While I was doing the interview, I apologize for that. I really do. But obviously, I think you all understand that I'm I'm trying to be fair to the person I'm interviewing and paying attention and all that good stuff. So, Obnoxious Blight Bringer for $20 says, didn't expect Crucible Blade to lead to Scott Horton. Hell yeah, totally agree. And First Person for $2 says, great cast W. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, my wife Courtney says, Hank and I listened to the whole thing. Well, he mainly listened to Mickey Mouse. I prefer Scott to Mickey Mouse, but I can understand how my 3-year-old might put his money on Mickey. Hank's been doing really well. He's hilarious. He's had some good moments this Easter. So we'll get to the calls. Calls are going to be through Discord. If you need help, I'll put the link up to Discord. If you're not a member of my Discord, you have to go to the rules section, click on the American flag once you've read the rules as an acknowledgement that you understand the rules, and then join the waiting room, and I'll try to get you in order. The only rules I have is, remember, I'm on YouTube. Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Enigma. It looks like you're in the waiting room, so if you want to talk, it's fine. The only thing I ask is that you don't violate terms of service when you call in. So no slurs, no threatening people, no breaking the law or anything like that. And if I boot you off, it probably has more to do with timing. So, for example, if no one calls in but one person, I could probably talk to them for an hour. If there's 6 people waiting in the waiting room, probably then I might have to shorten time. You don't have to talk about this topic. You could talk about whatever you want. You could argue against me on something you think I would disagree with. You could agree with me. You could talk about anything you want. Topics might include Trump's transition team, how politics have been going this week. Obviously, the interview I just had with Scott, or any personal drama shit that you would like me to go over. Anything of that nature. So, but there you go. I'll put did I put the link? Did it paste? Yes. So the link's there. Anything you all want to talk about. The show is better when you all talk. So let's do it. All right. Get my headset on here. All right. First, we have Enigma.
Yeah, hi.
Hello, Enigma. Did not like the interview with Scott. Is that what you said?
No, I didn't like the interview because you reiterated information that he already had informed the public. And you didn't mention the Brzezinski, for example, that the grand chessboard, that the CIA, if you Google it, you can find it at the CIA.org actually publicly informs that they actually use it for their oh my god, sorry, I'm drunk. Yes, again, I'm a Swede. No, I'm a Finn. That's why I'm drunk. Okay, anyways, do you have any objections to my critique, what you have had for your conversation with
Yes, what your criticism was that I reiterated points that he made?
Yeah, because you didn't actually, you just sat there instead of having questions about things that could have been very important for the public to understand.
Okay, so first off, I guess there's different ways to do an interview. I thought that he was giving relevant information. Did you think anything he particularly said wasn't important? That I should have cut him off? What point would you have cut him off?
Everything he said was important.
Okay.
But the most important part is to cut somebody off so it doesn't sound like they're simply going on a tirade about what they think about something.
Okay, why don't you shut up for a second, drunk? There, like that.
Okay, yes.
Cutting him off like that. Hey, excuse me, drunk.
I love it.
Please, shush, shush, drunk. That's what you want me to do. Cut people off like that? That's it?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
It's much better. I prefer when I'm doing an interview, I think that my job is to steer the conversation in a direction that I think that myself and the audience will find informative and enjoyable. And if the person that you are doing the interview with is giving a stream of information that they seem to be in the flow of giving that information and being comfortable, I think most of the time it's more of a hindrance to interrupt them. And seeing as how you've admitted that you thought all the information that he was giving was important, I didn't understand where I should have interjected to be like, oh, and don't forget Emil Brzezinski wrote the Grand Chessboard and the CIA has admitted that they've interfered in Ukraine.
Yeah, I thought it would have been important because you haven't mentioned that under his interviews
wait a minute,
before.
why didn't you mention the biolabs? Why didn't you mention that? It seems like it would have been important.
Because
why didn't you
it's
mention
fucking
that?
ridiculous.
It's critical.
Because no, it isn't. Because it's under speculation. It's not proven. But he could have mentioned the fucking book that Brzezinski wrote about, and he actually mentions that he would encourage America to attack Ukraine because it would be an advantage for America to be on hegemony.
Wow, man! I guess I dropped the ball. I should have went to Finland and got drunk with you. Can you tell us where your channel is and the great interviews that you do? Can you point us in that direction?
Sorry, that doesn't jive with reasoning about what I said.
No, what you're doing is you're making a criticism that has to do with not saying something. There's probably 50 hours of information easily that Scott could, if he retells his book and goes into all the sources.
Scott seems to be really, really, really intelligent.
Good.
And he has.
Please, I'm going to cut you off as you would like for me to do. I'm going to cut you off. You're drunkenly rambling, so I'll finish my point on my show.
No, I haven't been.
Yes.
You sound like the drunk compared to me.
I don't think that's true at all. I sound quite articulate.
Yeah, I think you're not.
Nonetheless, I'll finish.
Okay.
So there's probably 50 hours worth of material you could say. And what you're saying is because I committed the sin of omission, because I didn't interrupt him to talk about something that he wasn't talking about, that it was a bad interview. I think that that's sort of a nonsensical way to view things. I think that if you listen to any particular interview on any particular topic, anybody who knows, please, drunk. Excuse me, drunk. Please.
Yes.
I'm doing the right thing now. I'm cutting off an obvious belligerent drunk that doesn't have a show of their own because no one wants to listen to them because they're a worthless sack of shit. I'm glad you appreciate it. Glad you appreciate it. Glad. So quiet there, drunk. So, anyways, the sin of omission, where you don't say anything. If you did 10 different interviews with Scott Horton talking about specific things in Ukraine, or you talk to someone like Ron Paul on Fed Reserve policy, etc., there's always going to be things that weren't brought up, and some of those things might be your favorite point to talk about. The idea that your criticism of me is I should have interrupted him to be like, what about Emil Brzezinski and the Grand, or Zbigniew Brzezinski, however they chessboard, and the book, The Grand Chessboard. Yeah, I don't really apologize.
I love you, Rob.
That I didn't bring that up.
Look, I'm sorry, Rob. It's just a passionate thing that I thought you should have brought up. But I love you. What you have done in the recent times, Conversation with Destiny, I think you are a really good influence for the American public.
Thank you.
Sorry about me being an asshole, and yes, I'm a drunk.
I don't mind you being an asshole. It's fine. I don't mind it.
Okay.
It's perfectly fine. I welcome the criticism. I'm kind of joking, interrupting you like you suggested I should interrupt. You're the one who admitted you were drunk.
You should.
But I am making a serious point that the idea, like, you could say that about, like, almost any interview ever. Like, the nature of like, for example, if me and Scott are on a 3-day retreat, a libertarian retreat, and it's just us for like 4 hours a day eating dinner and shit, I'm sure that shit like that probably gets brought up. But it's when you're in the context of an interview, you have to ask yourself, what type of interview do you want to see? What type of interviewer do you want to be? And I don't think that...
In all honesty, I didn't think you had even cared about the fact that he had several conversations with these. It's like he suddenly became public when he wrote the book. Was in Piers Morgan, and you. Sorry, how in the hell did you even have the chance to have him in the conversation, like coming to your pod?
A guy that watches
Or
my
what-
show named Conservative Carnage emailed his people or something. I don't know exactly who he emailed. Then reached out to me and asked if I could do the interview on Tuesday. And I emailed their people and
Okay.
said, I can't do it on Tuesdays. They said, how about Friday? That's it.
I honestly think Justice was like a grave sin committed, simply for not asking questions that was outside what he already had answered in the public. Because he seems very intelligent.
I allowed him, I asked an open-ended question, and I allowed him to talk to his heart's content.
Yes.
The open-ended question I asked...
Usually you interrupt me, but... okay.
The open-ended question that I
Right.
asked that I thought got to the heart of what I think is the most important thing, which is that the roots of this seem to be directly from 2014 and the Maidan revolution. And so there is this big debate as to whether or not there was a color revolution based in the United States that led to that revolution occurring. And so he decided to talk about that at broader length, talking about going back 10 years prior to that. Then he decided to talk, in some cases, talking about the history of the conflict in that region going back to World War II. I didn't think it was worth cutting any of that off to talk about Zbigniew Brzezinski's book, The Grand Chessboard, that he wrote in the, mid-90s?
Sure. But I think...
If you want to ask the audience, I bet 95% of them would agree with me that they didn't think it was worth cutting him off to talk about the book, The Grand
your
Chessboard.
audience, you're right. Let the audience answer to that. Do the audience think the argument that he should have gone into the... Because Brzezinski had explained why he thinks that America made Russia or Soviet Union go into Afghanistan, and it explains his argument that he had with Piers Morgan, that Brzezinski himself thought it was a good idea, and this simply... sorry. Okay, we were about to ask the audience who thinks that it would have been a better idea to actually at least mention Brzezinski and see what he would have said. 1, to mention Brzezinski. 2, not to mention Brzezinski.
I'll put a poll up.
Yes, I'm expecting they will write 1 or 2. Oh my God, I'm screaming, and I'm actually at my ex's house, and they're trying to sleep upstairs. Sorry.
There, I put a poll up.
Yeah.
People get the poll I wrote. Let's see what the poll said. It said, was the interview bad because I didn't cut off Mr. Horton to discuss the Brzezinski book?
I don't even know if your public is aware about the Brzezinski book, The Grand Chessboard.
Well, then why would you want to see them?
Because I think just for that reason, they don't know if it's a good reason to bring it up. I think if he would have mentioned things about Brzezinski, which is in principle conferred... For fuck's sakes, I don't understand English that well. But do you know who Alexander Dugin is?
Yes.
Yes. Which is called Putin's brain, which is bullshit.
Okay.
But he has influenced the geostrategical ideas for warfare, for example. And his idea that Russia is more landform warfare, and Ukraine has a very important role as to their influence over Europe. Meanwhile, America has a very influential role as of... what the fuck? I don't know the word. Fly. No, wait. It's like you're cut off from Europe. Yeah, you had the Monroe Doctrine for a long while, and your influence is oh my God, it's so fucking complicated. I can't even explain it at this moment. But you...
All right, man.
I lost my.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. All I can say is so far we only have 21 votes, but 81% of the people say no. The interview wasn't bad because I didn't cut off Scott Horton to discuss the grand
Yeah,
chessboard.
yeah, okay. They don't even know about the chessboard to begin with. Yeah,
The
okay.
chessboard
But
is just, this is
hey,
already, listen, what was said in that book that you want reference was already mentioned by Scott without using the term Brzezinski, right?
okay.
Which is the idea that the
Okay,
United
it might
States,
be true. Okay, that might be true actually, because I was so caught up that you didn't mention the author.
okay,
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. It's my fault. I was just so excited about you getting Scott over. I didn't expect that.
well, I'm glad you was excited about that. So, and I do
Okay,
appreciate you
sorry.
calling in. I do. And I don't
Mm.
disagree with your point that Brzezinski and many other people that have been involved in U.S. intelligence and State Department have publicly acknowledged in
You're
writings and
doing.
interviews the United States'
Okay, yeah,
willfulness
yeah.
to think that they have the right to go into countries to control their government for Western interest. It's been said many times.
Mm.
You're not wrong. I talk about the book, The Grand Chessboard, sometimes on
It's
my
a
show.
great
One of the
road.
things that Brzezinski mentions in there was that arming the Mujahideen to go into Russia was a
Mm.
good thing. And
Mm.
when he was interviewed about it specifically in like 98, 99, if that was a good idea because it turned out that they were becoming the Al Qaeda, he said, of course, we gave Russia their own Vietnam. And then, of course,
Wow.
several years later, we had 9/11. And then we were told we had to give up our rights because Al Qaeda was such a serious threat to us. So, yes, and Brzezinski is also Mika Brzezinski's father, who is married to Morning Joe. So, you are right. He has written, as have many other people. For example, they talked about Henry Kissinger. Scott Horton talked about Henry
Mm.
Kissinger in the interview, where he mentioned that Kissinger specifically blamed Merkel for the collapse of sort of the Yanukovych deal to get involved in the West, because Kissinger said that Merkel drove too hard of a bargain. That goes sort of to what
Mm.
Brzezinski's talking about there, that the West, Brzezinski's talking about the United States specifically, but that the West feels that they get to meddle in these countries, have color revolutions, etc. So I appreciate the thought. I don't think you're making an erroneous point. I just think it's something I would call a sin of omission, which I could do to probably
Sin
99
of
point.
omission.
Yes, that
I
something
haven't
is
heard
bad
that term
because,
before.
well, what it references is that something is bad because you didn't say something. So it wasn't anything you
Yeah,
said, but
yeah,
it was something you
actually,
didn't say.
yes.
And the
Yes.
problem is you could say that about almost any interview ever.
True.
So I don't know. I guess that's just the
I'm sorry,
perspective.
Rob. I appreciate that you actually had this interview, and but I don't know. I think you were too passive, but I appreciate you gave him the time to talk
Yeah.
because, as far as I have listened to him, he's the most funniest and interesting when he gets upset.
Well, I will say
Yeah,
maybe he'll come back on and maybe we'll open it up to audience questions and you could ask exactly what you want or bring up the point that you want.
yeah, because he can't call me a fucking idiot and not
Well, I
drunk,
don't
because
think he
that
would
will be
he
hilarious.
probably wouldn't disagree with you. I just don't know
Yeah,
that he would
and he
say
wouldn't.
that he has to bring up Brzezinski's book in every interview or
No,
it's up for that
no,
interview.
of course not.
So that's all.
It's
But
just that he seems very uh, sorry.
it's
As
all
I
right, man.
said, I'm a Swede. My first language is Finnish,
It's fair enough,
so
man.
it's in,
I only know sort of English and then like redneck, which we have our own dialect. That's about it. So
that's a
anyone who speaks more than one language is
redneck
smarter than me.
is a universal language when you use swear words and whatever. But I appreciate what you're doing,
Thank
Rob,
you.
and sorry for being a bitch.
Now you're fine, man. All right. Well, hey, thanks for calling in. Call back in someday,
Yeah,
man. Appreciate it.
yeah. Take care.
Take care. Okay. You know, it is in the spirit of, I know he's in Sweden, I think he said. So, I don't know that they celebrate Thanksgiving. I'm pretty sure they don't celebrate the United States Thanksgiving. But I understand libations being consumed over the Thanksgiving weekend. So, believe it or not, something that's occurring here, maybe a bigger holiday in these parts to some people than Thanksgiving, here in Pennsylvania, rural Pennsylvania, hunting season starts tomorrow for deer season. So, where I live, that's a big deal. That's like everybody used to take off school before they would give you days off school for hunting season. So they just started giving you days off in high school so you could go hunt. So, I thought the interview went quite well. It asked, I think nails it. The interview was to present Scott Horton's perspective, not a comprehensive history lesson on every important detail. Doesn't mean I haven't heard of Brzezinski's part in history. Yeah, I agree. I feel that there are different hats you wear depending on what role you're playing. And one of the parts of being a streamer, and at least in the way I do it, is oftentimes I am doing things that are vastly different. For example, let's say that I was going to I'll give you the clearest example I can. I believe it was 2022, though it might have been 2020. I think it was 2022, though. Midterm election year. There's also state level elections that went on. So we had a radio show. Now, this would have been 2020. It was definitely 2020. I had a radio show that was going on at the time. And I had two co-hosts, Carlos Saldivia, a friend of mine, and Todd Bartley, a journalist. And as part of what we were offering to moderate debates from people that were running maybe at state or local levels. As a debate moderator, your position is vastly different than being a debater or being an interviewer, etc. And we had a couple offers and they all fell through, or a couple people that reached out to us, but they fell through. But one of them said yes. And so it was a state level position and it was a Republican running against a Democrat. Now I'm going to vote for that Republican 99 out of 100 times over this Democrat. We set up the debate. We agreed to be fair moderators, and the Republican backed out an hour before the debate. But the Democrat was like, well, I still want to come on. My role at that point transitioned from I was sort of a moderator hybrid combo. I'm not going to vote for this lady, but she generously gave us her time. She came on, and it's not her fault that the opponent didn't show up. Nor was it my role to debate this woman. Even though I would disagree with many of the things she was saying, that's not my role. I'm not there to debate her. So, I would ask questions. What's your I would say something like this. The roads in Pennsylvania, despite the fact that we have a high gas tax, one of the highest in the country, that supposedly goes to paying for the roads, it turns out that the roads are rated as amongst the bottom third of all of the states. What would you do to ensure that our infrastructure is being improved? And then I let her talk. And I had people furious with me. Why would you help a Democrat like that? It's not helping. That's my job. If I was debating her, I would have had a lot to say. It's like that being an interviewer, right? You could interview someone you disagree with, but you're not debating them. The purpose of an interview is to allow that person's perspective to come out to the audience. That's it. Now, there's times as an interviewer that you step in to try to steer things into a certain direction or not, and you might have a little pushback or a little addition here or there, but I feel a quality interview is the interviewer is only talking 10% of the time. My job as the interviewer is one, to the audience, to hope that they're informed and entertained, and second, to the person I'm interviewing, to help ensure that their perspective's being put out there and they feel comfortable and are also having a good time. And I think that was accomplished. I think Scott seemed to enjoy himself, and he controlled the direction of the discussion. I thought it was fantastic. So I hope that the audience enjoyed it as well. I understand maybe other people do interviews in different ways, but just the general criticism of should I interrupt more during an interview, that's where I'm coming from. I'm not saying that other people don't have a more aggressive interview style, and maybe that's to be preferred. And maybe if you're on a different type of platform, if you're doing an interview and you're on a cable news show and you only have an 8-minute segment, maybe you're interrupting more because it's like, hey, I had 3 or 4 questions to ask you. We only have 8 minutes. That's different. But in this sort of long form hour interview, that's sort of how I feel about it. So I don't know. I hope that people enjoyed it. All right. The lines are open. Now, I know it's a weird day, right? Thanks, Nico. I know it's a weird day. It's the day after Thanksgiving. It's a weekend. It's a Friday night and whatever. But we are taking calls. I put the link out there again to the Discord. And again, we'll talk about whatever topic people want. If you want to talk about Thanksgiving-related things, arguments you had with people at Thanksgiving, if you want to talk about streamer drama, we could talk about that. I don't care. I'm open to talking about anything. It is one of the rare times, because for basically 3.5 days, I haven't consumed any media whatsoever, that I'm not really up to date on any specific thing that's happening. So I didn't really prepare a show other than the interview with Scott, and I figured I would stick around for call-ins. But if no one wants to call in, that's fine. We'll wrap up a little early. That's fine, too. Oh, Raistlin's going to call in, but he needs 15 minutes. Okay. Maybe you really wanted to argue with me about something, a particular take. It could be anything within reason. People want to call back in and talk about the 19th Amendment again. Tonight would be just fine to do that. I'm noticing now, look at this. I got to get a haircut. My sideburn on my left side grows so much faster than the right side. Oh, there's more leaks about Destiny. I missed that. Whatever. I find it all disgusting. And here's something that I'll talk about. I talk about this a little. So I've talked about what makes a good streamer. Why are we all shitty people? Is it that shitty people get into being big streamers? Or is it to get big, you have to be shitty? It turns you shitty? I don't know. But here's something that I think's worth talking about. If I looked at the proposed tariffs, I haven't seen the specific proposed ones now. I saw what was suggested with Canada and Mexico, but that was about it. Oh, yeah, that's exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I saw the proposed. I think those are clearly a bargaining chip, and I hope that they don't come to fruition. I think that it's designed to encourage Canada and Mexico to be more cooperative on immigration issues. Anyways. Are we in it? Have you noticed that okay, how do I put this? I've been thinking about this. There's a lot of people that I respect, and the less I heard from them, the better. Like, let me give you an example. Jordan Peterson. I read Jordan Peterson's book, the 12 Rules book. You saw the little clips of Jordan Peterson. And it was good. I liked him a lot. I thought he was saying very sensible things, and things in a way that I'd never heard them. And then the more I heard from him, like, just dumb shit started to get said. Did you miss the response to Super Chat? Yeah, I think you did. I think I mentioned your Super Chat. Let me make sure, though. Roar for $5 said, Scott and his people were tight with Dave Smith. Oh, no, I didn't see this. Scott and his people were tight with Dave Smith, too. Could be a connection, but love to talk, Scott. Rob's making move. Thank you. Yeah, I would love to talk to Dave Smith. Hopefully I'll send him this interview and he'll be interested. So, no, I appreciate that. Vanilla Sarsaparilla for $5 says, hey, Rob, what's the core of your worldview? What motivates you? Let's get philosophical. Okay, I'll talk about that in a second. Is there something about sort of the social media era where all of us could say whatever we want at any time, that you're starting to realize that maybe even the people that you thought were the greatest thinkers are just normal people with shitty comments as well? It's just before, the only things that made it out into the ether was their best comments. But now it's like everything's out there. So, like, think of it like this. Like, take thought-provoking ideas out. And let's just do like comedy. Like, you see a stand-up comic, and what you're seeing basically is a set that they've practiced that probably, I'm guessing a good stand-up comic probably write 10 times more material than ever make it on a special, right? So what you're hearing from them is they write stuff, they test it out, you never hear that. Then the stuff that gets a reaction, they refine it, and then they go out, and then finally by the time you get it on a CD or you're hearing it on Spotify or you see it on stage, it's probably been hashed out, and that's just the top 5 to 10% of their material. But what if there was like a camera on them 24/7? There'd probably be a lot of times you're like, wow, that was really stupid, that was cringe, that wasn't that funny. Why would that be any different with like political thought or philosophical thought? And all of a sudden you get people that used to have these like pithy like comments that you're like, wow, that's so deep. But then when they have their own show and they're talking for 2 hours a day every day, it's like, oh, you also say a lot of dumb shit. And I'm not saying this to attack Jordan Peterson. I'm just saying him as an example. Maybe the answer is we're all stupid. Maybe that's the answer. Or I don't think stupid's the right word because that would have to be comparative. But we all have thoughts that aren't the greatest, like deepest shit. And the issue is 95% of people, they ain't putting their thought out there. At least before social media. And now it's, fallible, that's it. Now it's like, well, so you can have someone like me, maybe you think I'm really good on a litany of topics, but then you hear me talk about certain stuff and you're like, this guy's a fucking idiot. What's he talking about? And you're probably right. I probably am a fucking idiot. But you're just talking so much. And oftentimes it's the people that you barely hear from. Like, so I think of someone like, someone I respect economically, like Thomas Sowell. I've seen these little interviews he's done. It's amazing. I've seen some of the presentations he's put on. It's amazing. But what if he had a show, like a 3-hour-a-day show, 5 days a week? Would he end up talking about, like, topics outside of his field of expertise that you'd be like, ugh, what's this guy on about? I don't know. So it's just something I was thinking about the other day because I was like, man, it seems like so many people, like you'll see it with like Joe Rogan. Like now all of a sudden that Joe's going to be persona non grata. Him, Elon Musk, targets on their back. They cost the Democrats. That's going to be the Democrat narrative. So they're going to go through and they're going to find every dumb shit that Elon or Joe Rogan's ever said. And there's going to be a lot of it. Is it because Joe and Elon are overly dumb people? No, it's because they're people that have said a lot of things. And anyone who says a lot of things is probably going to say a lot of dumb shit. Myself included. And so I was just thinking about that. Was like, there seems to be a certain not harm, but there's risk in putting yourself out there so much because there's a greater chance that you're going to say something cringe or dumb or head scratching. Vanilla Sarsaparilla asks a question. Rob, what is the core of my worldview? What motivates me? Let's get philosophical. Well, there's 2 questions buried in there. One, I think, is probably what you mean, but maybe not. Maybe I'm misreading. Because I do a political show here, what is at the core of my belief politically? And so to answer that, I talk about this a lot, but I'll try to make it quick, is I consider myself, if I had to put labels on me, I'd put 3 labels. One would be populist. That's first and foremost. Second would be libertarian adjacent. And third would be conservative. That's my political worldview. I feel the core motivating belief I have is that I want a government that at least attempts to be good for the people that they're supposed to serve. That doesn't mean direct democracy. 80% of the people could want some dumb shit policy, and the government's like, we ain't gonna go for that. But they at least should have at the forefront of their thought benefiting the people of a particular country. And I feel we don't have that. I feel the forefront of the thought. Sometimes our government does policies that end up residually benefiting the people of this country, but their primary concern is entrenching their own power and those of their allies. And I believe it's through massive corruption. So that's where my belief comes on that. Philosophically, though, I think that my default is I always prioritize politically the concept of liberty and freedom. I'm not an anarcho-capitalist. I believe government should exist. But I always try to view things through the starting point of looking at people's freedom. Should you be allowed to say blank on social media? Yes. With very few exceptions. The default should always be yes. Now, there are exceptions. Should you be allowed to post pictures of you harming children in the most grotesque ways? Of course not. But should you be allowed to say hateful slurs at people? Yeah, probably. But what is... So that's politically the answer. The core of my worldview, what motivates me outside of politics, my wife and my kid. I want to live every day so that I make the people around me think that they were better off for me being in their life. I want, and that primarily, first and foremost, there's levels of it. My wife and my son. That's my goal in life. If I died tomorrow, I hope that my wife and my son say, he was a great husband, he was a great father. There's all sorts of stuff that's shitty about me. I don't make that much money. It's like my wife has to like pull teeth to get me to do things like burn boxes today and shit like that. But that's generally what I'm trying to do. And then obviously the next group would be my extended family, like my family, my parents, my in-laws, and my community. I'll tell you a story. This maybe to tell a story represents what I value in life. Doing the line of work I do, home health care with people with adults with disabilities, there's a lot of medication. And I can't talk about the specifics of medication, obviously, because there's privacy concerns. But suffice to say, I don't think I'm saying anything that you wouldn't know. There's medications, and part of my role is to help administer those medications. Different people, it's different. Sometimes you'll work with a person who's perfectly capable of understanding what their medications are, and they know what time to take them. And maybe you just have to help them get a glass of water or something to take their pills. Other people, they don't understand what their medications are or what times to take them, so you have to help pop their medications for them, and you have to undergo trainings and stuff for this to be able to do it. Part of that is a pharmacy will send the medications to the home. Now, you're supposed to check as those medications come, make sure all the medications are correct, sign off on them, driver leaves. I usually do a good job of that. So I did it one time and thought everything was good. And I went home from work and I came back. The medications, one of them was missing. And I asked the other staff, and the other staff was like, I didn't touch those medications. I didn't do anything wrong. And I believe the staff, he would have told me. And I was like, huh. So I came to the conclusion, as it happened several times before, that the pharmacy forgot to send this particular pill. So I called the pharmacy and I said, and this, maybe I shouldn't do this, but I'll tell you straight up, the pill was vitamin D. So it wasn't like a serious medication, but in my line of work, even a vitamin, you have to have a prescription for a doctor. I can't just give someone vitamin. I can't just give someone sunscreen or Tylenol. I have to have written permission from a doctor to be able to do that. It has to be prescribed. I can't just go over the counter, buy some Tylenol and be like, here you go. I can't even do cough drops. All of that stuff has to be regulated. You have to have subscriptions. It has to be paperwork for all of it. So vitamin D though, no big deal, right? I call the pharmacy. I say, hey pharmacy, can you send me vitamin D? You forgot to send it. And they said no. And I chewed this woman out. I was like, this is horse shit. I'm going to get wrote up for this. Why can't you just send me the vitamin D? What's the copay? I'll pay it. It's just vitamin D. Why can't you send? Nope, we can't. And I did. I mean, I'm trying to think like verbatim what I said. I was like, this is pretty ridiculous. Like, we're taking care of people and you continually screw up the medications. You got to be ashamed of yourself. And I was yelling. get off the phone. Called my office. Look, I must not have double checked when they sent the medications. They missed one. My supervisor's like, okay, you're going to have to fill out a report. It's like, it wasn't a write-up, but it was like sort of they make a note of it. Okay. So I do all that shit. And then like 2 hours later, I'm cleaning and I put them in the wrong drawer. And the medications were there. And it was totally my fault. And I felt like shit for like a month. Because here's some lady working at some pharmacy, dealing with some belligerent asshole like me, just chewing her out when it was totally my fault and not hers. And I'm just reading her the riot act. She's not the person who puts those pills in there. She's not the delivery driver. She's just the woman who had to answer the phone. And there I am, chewing her ass out, and it ended up being my fault. And the reason that it affected me so much is, and this is going to sound stupid, but I swear it's true. I always, always, always try to tell myself, anytime I have another interaction with someone who's working, to always be positive. Always. Because if I could just improve that person's day just this much, then it's worth it. So I always say, hey, thank you so much. We always appreciate it. Hope you have a happy holiday. Just something like that in the phone. I always talk like that. And here I am, totally out of character, because I'm having a bad day, taking it out on this lady. That sums up what I am at my core. That I think that I'm placed on this world just like all of you. You have your religious, but outside of that, what does it mean? Just to try to, as much as possible, be a net benefit to the world. And being of net benefit to the world doesn't mean I did something that gets my name wrote in history books. It's my neighbor misses me when I move because I used to say hi when we were out picking up the mail. Like that's how I feel. That you should just try to be a positive person. So that's it. That's what motivates me. So, for me, sometimes that conflicts. If someone's, I haven't dealt with this yet, but presumably my kid goes to school and there's some bad shit happening. And my first priority is to my son and to my wife. Maybe then it doesn't work that way when I'm talking to the teacher or something like that. Have I reacted to the tariffs in Mexico and Canada? Yeah, so I didn't look at the specific tariffs. I did mention this earlier. I think that they're a bargaining chip. It seems obvious that they're sort of working, that it got both Mexico and Canada's leaders to get on the horn and say, whoa, 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 let's see what we could do. I don't think those tariffs will come into fruition. I think they're designed to force Mexico and Canada to change immigration policies. So that was my reaction to the tariffs. All right, Janice is in the chat. Let's bring them in. Remember, I'll put the link out one more time if people want to call in. All right. Let's move Janice up. I know I've talked to Janice before. Can you hear me, Janice? Hello, Janice. You there? Janice, can you hear me? I cannot hear you. I see you're in the chat. No, you're muted. Your mute button's on in the Discord call, Janice. Go ahead, try now. Nope, you unmuted, but I still can't hear you. Go into options and check your mic setting. Wouldn't be a call-in show without me or audience members having audio issues. That's what it's like to be a 40-year-old streamer, though. These young kids, they're on the tech issues. They're on it. I'm young. Look at this. Not looking so young. Also trying to get a haircut here next week and a beard trim. Yeah, Janice, can't hear you, mate. Don't know what the issue is. So you're still on the air, so I'll just keep going on and talking. If you come on, I'll hear you and I'll let you know. So go ahead and keep trying to fix your audio issues there. Vanilla Sarsaparilla for $5 says, "Do unto others. Appreciate the response." No problem. Yeah, my wife, a fan of me getting a haircut. Absolutely true. I believe it's Janice is Janus. I hope I'm pronouncing that. He says he's going to try back later, but I believe it's a man. All right, we'll move you to the waiting room then. You can try back later. But yeah, Discord's not the most friendly for tech issues. Yeah, is that what it is? We got a bunch of drunk people. It could be. I can't blame him. I did not consume any alcohol at all this Thanksgiving. I'm not much of a drinker anymore, if I'm totally honest with you all. I used to be quite the good drinker. Pretty good. They do get expensive. It's not bad where I live. The woman who cuts my hair, the place I go, I guess it's different, ladies, but the place I go, they usually charge me, I think, $15 for beard and hair trim, but I always give them like $25. I think they do a good job, and they listen to me wax on in there. What are my thoughts on Gorka being a war hawk and not what I would expect for Trump? Yeah, I talked about this last week. I'm not a fan of Gorka. I'm not. I do think he's a war hawk. You might be able to say the same thing about Rubio. I don't know. I kind of I talked a lot about it last week, but in general, a lot of these appointments aren't perfect. I'm not going to get blackpilled over. Trump did have a coalition, and part of those people were some sort of neocon type people that voted for him. So you would expect some of his cabinet to come from groups like that, just like you would expect some of them come from the, RFK wing of things, which, happened. So hopefully that's reined in. Is it Great Clips? No, it's just a local place. It's called George's Barbershop. What's up, webmaster? That's where I get my haircut. Yeah, no problem, Bibs. So I think it's perfectly. I think that I'm somewhere in between. I think that with all these things, such as his Surgeon General, she's terrible. We talked about her at quite some length. I think you have part of me is like, you're absolutely fair to criticize when you think these things are bad. Then part of me is like, but it's still much better than it was in 2016. So I'm not going to blackpill totally. But yeah, I'm not a fan of some of these picks that came down the pipe. But it's still better than 2016. So we'll see. But, from my perspective, I honestly don't expect Trump to do much draining the swamp at all. I think Rubio's, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst and 10 being the best, Rubio is probably a 3. I don't particularly like him. I think from that vein of people, he's probably as close to as good as it gets. If you're going to take someone who's sort of more old school, Paul Ryan-esque Republican, he seems to have lightened up on some of the Ukraine stuff. I think he voted against the last aid package to them. He seems to have been out there publicly, even when it wasn't so popular, speaking favorably of Trump, so maybe he's more loyal. Hegseth is good. Tulsi's good. RFK's good. Tom Homan is fantastic. That's going to be spearheading sort of deportation efforts. So there's good people. And then I think, depending on how much influence or power the Doge organization is office with Vivek and Elon, I think that's great. This guy, I can't pronounce his name, but Dr. Beccara, you know who I'm talking about? That just got appointed at NIH. Fantastic pick. What's my favorite movie? Probably Big Lebowski, Caddyshack are probably tied for my top 2 movies. Yeah, I agree, Nate. That's the name. Linda McMahon. Hey, she got tombstoned by Kane once, so that's kind of resiliency you need. But I couldn't tell you my favorite movie in the last 20 years. I don't know. But those Boondock Saints. I like John Wick just for being mindless. I guess as a sort of recent movie. But I love westerns, older westerns. Sergio Leone movies. I'm a big fan of. Conan, the original Conan the Barbarian, one of my favorite movies as far as an action movie. One of the best soundtracks in movie history, for my money. Have I ever been tombstone? Just the shitty microwave pizzas. Vanilla Sarsaparilla, Fight Club. Yeah, I like Fight Club. I went through a part where I hated Fight Club. So, just to give you an idea, lest my audience think that I'm some trendsetter, sometimes I'm too contrarian, right? Unforgiven's a great, I don't know if it's the greatest Western movie, but it is great. So, a lot of times I will dislike, especially when I was young, I would dislike something just because people I knew liked it. Like, I'll give you Fight Club was one of those. I had this group of friends that thought Fight Club was the greatest movie ever, and like it was what a crazy twist ending. And I was just like making fun of the absurdity, like, oh yeah, dude, how cool. Both characters, spoiler alert, both characters are just Edward Norton. He made the other guy up cool, But now going back and watching it, I do really like the movie. The best example I give like that is the band Dave Matthews Band. I fucking hated Dave Matthews Band in college because I knew all these like fraternity stoners that were like, oh man, Dave Matthews Band's like, he's the greatest musician of our generation, man. And I would just be like, man, this sucks. But then I saw him live and it was a blast. And I gave him a chance to start listening. I was like, yeah, it's actually pretty good. But yeah. Am I excited for an all-women Fight Club? Is that happening? I wouldn't be surprised. Every time Catherine revved up every time Catherine revved up a microwave, I'd piss my pants and pass out for half an hour or so. Catherine. I don't know, Weld. I haven't seen Fight Club in a while, though. Like I said, this Thanksgiving I watch Planes, Trains, Automobiles. Today we watch Polar Express. We're taking Hank next weekend on a Polar Express train ride. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we watched the movie with him today. And we watched the new Grinch movie. Not the one with Jim Carrey, but the newer animated one. He liked it. He was invested in it. Christmas Vacation's fantastic. Yeah. The Jerk's great. Probably my favorite Steve Martin movie. Planes, Trains, Automobiles right up there, but I really like Dirty Rotten Scoundrels with him and Michael Caine. I think that's a hilarious movie. Cousin Eddie. Is that the movie that's what it was from, Christmas Vacation? Yeah, you're right, it is. Yeah, I got you, Well. Big mistake on my part. Yeah, Planes, Trains. There's something about that movie that's so Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. It's the message behind it is so. It's just everything about that movie I love. It's hilarious. The plot is just. If you've never seen it, you should watch it. It's a simple plot. Two dudes trying to get home for Thanksgiving, and everything goes wrong. Their plane screws up, their cars mess up, and they keep getting stuck with each other. And But the kind of the message to the movie is just fantastic. It's really to have a genuinely funny, lighthearted movie, and then also without it being cheesy to have this message. I won't ruin the ending for you, but the end of that movie is really one of the like most heartwarming things. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. We were watching this movie at my wife's sister's one time. Forget the name of it, but it was ladies. It was that, what's her name? I don't know. Anyways, we're like watching them, just half paying attention, and I was like, I started to realize it's literally like almost shot for shot the exact plot of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. And I'm just like, what the? Then I started to pay attention. It literally was just a gender swap of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. So instead of the two, Rebel Wilson was one of the actresses, and Anne Hathaway, that was it, yeah. And it was like, and it was not funny. And I'm not even saying, I don't know shit about Anne Hathaway or Rebel Wilson. Maybe they're fantastic actresses. I don't know. It just didn't work. Maybe it worked if you never saw Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. But my goodness, talk about big shoes to fill. Michael Caine and Steve Martin? You're redo a comedy with them? I don't give a shit if you gender swap it at all. Good luck. Like, that's... Like, there's certain things that just... It was like when they redid the Aladdin movie. I guess I know why they're going to do it. But who the hell wants to be the genie after Robin Williams? Like, you lose. I can't imagine any other actor in history. Like, that guy was perfect for that role. Like, he was basically, his comedy style was so fast-paced and cartoony anyways. But I guess they probably paid Will Smith a huge pile of money, so it didn't matter. But even like the new Gladiators movie, I'm sure it's fine, but it's like, really? You're the student? It's like, okay, here's the deal. You're going to be, the Russell Crowe of this movie. Good luck. I guess at this point, they're just like, whatever, it's money. Who gives a fuck? I don't know. But, all right. We'll try to bring Janice in one more time to see if his mic's working. Janice, you there? Oh, I heard something briefly, I thought. I don't have you muted or anything, do I? Can you hear me, Janice? All right, we'll move you out, see if you get that fixed. Raistlin, what's happening? Can you hear me, Raistlin?
Hey man, how was your Thanksgiving?
It was very good. Thank you so much. I had a great time. Still recuperating physically, I feel, from the amount of turkey I ate. So, you there? I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, now I can. Yeah, it cut out there for a couple seconds. But so what's happening? How was your Thanksgiving?
Oh, one moment. I think I know what's going on.
Okay.
Is this better? I was on cellular instead of Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it sounds better so far. Yeah.
Okay. So the two topics I wanted to touch on are tariffs and immigration.
Okay.
So I don't know do you want to go into one first, or do you want to tell me, or do you want me to tell you my stance on them?
We talked previously about immigration, correct?
No, I don't think we talked about immigration. I can't recall. I think we talked about AI the other time I called in.
Maybe. I'm trying to think if I remember that. But whatever you go ahead. Whatever you want to talk about, it's fine by me.
Okay, so I guess we'll do immigration first because it's kind of fresh on my mind. arguing with some other conservatives about this, and personally, I feel that we have had periods where we are kind of inviting these people in and making promises to them of, eventually becoming a citizen and being able to work here legally and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't fulfill those promises and we have someone coming in um, and essentially just kicking them out, even the ones that are positively beneficial to our society.
Okay. So your argument.
What do you?
So what you're saying is basically, um, we've made promises to certain groups of people. They've done nothing wrong. They've been beneficial to society, and now maybe they get kicked out as well.
Yeah, I think they're gonna end up by necessity ended up with getting kicked out if Trump lives up to everything that he says he's going to, he says, you know what I mean?
Well, let's start with this. Who promised them, and what was the nature of the promise? So Trump's plan, as far as I know,
So
isn't to kick any legal citizen out. It's just illegals, correct? So it would have to be people that are currently illegal. So then my question, what was promised to them and who made the promise?
would you say that during the 1980s where we had a mass issuing of green cards and then never followed up on trying to make these people citizens? Like if you look at the graphs, it never we never got to the point where all of those people that were able to come here legally with a green card ended up, not all of them ended up citizens, and actually some of them ended up having to overstay their green cards because we got stricter on immigration.
But what was the promise to them in the 80s? We'll initially give you a green card, but inevitably you'll be a citizen.
Yes, as far as I know,
I don't believe
and I would
that's the
argue
case. I don't believe that's the case.
even I would have to do more looking into it,
My
honestly.
guess would be the closest that would come to that is we will give you a green card to come here, and eventually we will consider giving you a pathway to citizenship. Would be probably.
I think you're probably.
So that's not a promise that will make you a citizen, right? Like if you say to me, hey, you're in hard times right now, I'll leave you come move into my apartment. I got a spare room, you could move into there, as long as you're paying rent and stuff. And who knows, maybe you could become, sign the lease someday. But then you decide, you know what? I got a different roommate now, or my girlfriend's moving in. She don't want another dude here, so sorry, man, you got to go. You didn't promise me that eventually I would sign the lease.
I guess you're not incorrect in what you're saying.
Well, so then,
but I guess the argument against that would be if that roommate was contributing towards the rent and doing work around the apartment and keeping it clean.
And that's a separate. So that's sort of the second issue you're talking about. So the idea of a promise being made and broken to them sort of will dispense with that. So then the idea is, should we kick people out of the country that on net harms the country? So it gets rooted into this, right? I think that if your position, that seems to come from a thought of, and you tell me if I'm incorrect in saying this, that you want an immigration system that prioritizes being beneficial to the people of the United States. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. Yeah, I would say that's
so. It's not about, oh, well, we owe something to people around the world. We owe something to the people of Sri Lanka. We owe something to the people of New Zealand. You're saying, no, the United States has the right to have an immigration system that's beneficial to the people of the United States. You just think that it's not beneficial to kick out the tens of millions, not all of them. Is that fair?
So it's kind of half of my argument, okay. I guess. I guess I'll kind of dispense the idea that we have made promises necessarily to these people.
Okay.
But I think the idea is that would you say that Biden was kind of inviting people in? I think there's a quote of him welcoming people into the U.S. Would you agree with that he's kind of invited people in?
Will say that Biden and the Democrats certainly gave the signal to people around the world that they would be welcomed and accommodated, even if they came illegally.
Yeah. And I would agree with you entirely on that. And what I'm saying is that I think it's wrong in my mind to Like, of course, the people who came here committed crimes, maybe overstayed deportation orders and things of that nature. Of course, we should get rid of those. But what I'm saying is the people who came here under those pretenses and who are, living beneficial lives to our society, is it really smart to kick those people out?
Okay, but you're conflating two ideas again. So I'm trying to separate these ideas because the problem is, as I attack one, you'll default to the second, right? So
Okay.
let me explain why, right? If your argument is because Biden said, "Yeah, come surge the border, do this and that," therefore it's immoral to kick these people out, then it would be irrelevant as to whether or not they're beneficial to the United States, correct? The morality of we owe these people because we promised them would exist regardless if that person is working an awesome job that's benefiting the country or they're not. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So, but you would eventually say, but you would say that you would kick out the people despite the implicit promise if they're not beneficial to the country. Or you would say keep them all.
Definitely not keep them all. Like I said, of course, if somebody has like committed a crime,
But
or
let's
if
skip that out.
somebody
We'll say
has,
those are exceptions. Forget that.
okay.
Here's two people, right? Both these people came
Hmm.
in 2021 when Biden won. They came in
Yeah.
3 months after Biden won. Person one works at a factory job, puts in 12 hours a day, model employee, yeah, helps his elderly neighbor carry in our groceries, loved in the community, but he's an illegal. Person two, completely getting welfare, hasn't committed any crimes, hasn't been mean to anyone. He's a shut-in, he plays video games all day, is existing off of welfare from the United States. Came in at the exact same time with this other person. Both of them feel like they were promised by Biden to be here. Is it immoral to kick out the person who's not working?
I don't think it is, and
What?
especially in this case because you added in the welfare component.
Okay.
But I'm gonna be honest, Rob. I have not thought about somebody who's maybe has come here and is living with their parents and not doing anything. Like, should those people be kicked out? I haven't thought about that specifically.
But but
But
that's fine. But that has to do. But you understand the morality portion of this because you're making two arguments in effect. You're making a moral argument. You're saying if you
yeah,
promise someone something, you can't rescind the promise. You can't go back on it. That's argument one. And then argument two you're
right.
making has nothing to do with that. You're just saying these people are beneficial to everyone, so why would you kick them out? Those are two completely different arguments. Both of those arguments could be
Yeah.
used to say, don't kick these groups of people out, but they're coming from completely different places, right? I'm saying,
Okay.
I'm saying on
Hmm.
argument one, the moral argument, if your argument is promises were made, therefore it's immoral to not keep promises, then that has nothing
Yeah.
to do with argument two if they're good or bad for the country. With the exception of, we'll say, crimes and stuff, we could put that stuff to the side for now. That would mean that we would be
Yeah.
obligated because of one man or one political party that ran his fucking mouth to accept everybody in this country that was here that knowingly broke the law, even if they're a drain on our society. I reject that foundationally. I think that is terrible precedent to set. That would mean that anytime someone's elected president, they don't even have to change policy. They can just say something. Hey, I think that everyone in the world should be allowed to come here and take land from any wealthy person. Then they come and do it, and you
Okay.
say, well, the president promised them, and you can't go back on that promise. That seems absurd. So I don't buy that moral argument at all. Um,
Okay. Well, I think you've presented it in a way that I'm gonna have to think about. Because
in addition, I
yeah, I
don't think that
think
that's a direct promise. And I think the people would understand that's not a promise that will make you a citizen or will let you saying, yeah, surge the border, whatever. One guy saying that is not a promise that you get to stay here perpetually. And even beyond that, even if it was a promise based on one individual, such as Joe Biden or one political party, I don't think the rest of us
mhm,
need to sacrifice to honor that promise. And even if you said it was a promise that was made by anyone, I still don't give a shit and think that we should have to sacrifice the well-being of the American citizen for that. So I'm not persuaded by the moral argument whatsoever at all.
okay.
Then there's
Well,
the
let's
the
let's move
practical.
on from that. From
Okay,
that.
so then we'll just talk about. I fundamentally think that we should have an immigration system that accepts some amount of immigrants, but that system should prioritize the well-being of Americans. So, for example, let's say that there's some incredible engineer who lives in Japan, and he could make this one particular bridge. He's the only person in the world that's been capable of doing this, that will cut back resources 90% that would be needed for this bridge, and it's remarkably safe and whatever. And it would be massively beneficial to bring this person in to work for this company in the United States that would help cut down costs and make this company a bunch of money and make the country objectively better in its infrastructure. Sure, why shouldn't we agree to allow that person to legally come? That sounds wonderful to me. It doesn't have to be that level. That's just one scale of it. What if we say, man, we need 5,000 more workers to work on road construction, and we just, for whatever reason, here's people that specialize in that come from Zimbabwe. Fuck it. Yeah, I don't care. That's not every decision I'm going to agree with, but a foundational immigration policy that is rooted in the principle of not we owe people things around the world, or that we want to massively change the demographics of our country so that people vote the way we want them to vote. That's all bullshit. But if it's we think these people will be a net plus to this country and we have the right to kick them out if they're a next drain, yeah, I think that's fine. I think given that the policy, there's two things to say about this. I'll start with the harsher one. It's like when you set the bowl of candy out at Halloween and you got a ring camera. You're not home, but you want the kids. You feel bad. You want the kids to have candy. And every year you set it out and you look in your ring camera and your 50-year-old fat-ass neighbor comes and takes all the candy before the kids could get any of it. Then you tell your neighbor, don't do that, and you do it again next year, and your 51-year-old fat-ass neighbor takes all the candy before the kids can do. Then on year 3, you're like, you know what? I'm not going to set that bowl of candy out. And your fat-ass neighbor goes, but you don't care about the children? Oh, sorry. The goodwill of the American people has been exploited so much, in particular by Democrats, that have encouraged people to abuse the asylum-seeking process, that at this point the answer is, I'm sorry, you all need to go. Period. End of story. That's number one. Number two would be, if the people are... we should prioritize getting rid of the people that are criminals and already have deportation orders, and then the people that are a net drain are taking more out of our system than putting in. The people after that, I have no problem if we get rid of those aforementioned groups, and a lot of people will self-deport once we start getting rid of them, would be good. But I would have no problem then if a decision would be made, if the border at that point is secure, to say, we will give you people an option to become legal workers, not citizens. And part of that process will be, you will not accept any sort of government subsidy, welfare, etc. Period. You are only here at our privilege, or it is a privilege for you to be here as long as you are beneficial to the people of this country. As soon as you are not beneficial, you will promptly be sent home. Your green card will not be renewed. I have no problem with that.
Okay.
So I think that solves a lot of the problem of, but these people are good for the country. I think a lot of that is bullshit. A lot of people say this. That's certainly true. I'm sure there's well over 1 million people that are illegals that are actually beneficial to the country. I'm sure that's true. But I think that's overplayed. I think the majority, I think that we make it sound like illegals are better than American citizens. That's bullshit. I feel bad for illegals. Anyone who wants to come to, be better for their family and their, that's fine. I don't blame them, but we still have to have laws. We have to have a secure border. And, so I would have some sort of exception where people could have temporary status as long as they're beneficial. I'm not going to agree on every specific decision that would be made by whatever board that was, but at least if that's the policies rooted in that behavior, I think it'll be better than we have now. Do you disagree with that? You think that the people that came here illegally, if someone says, okay, that person's of benefit, that we should ignore the fact that they broke the law?
So this is where I was coming in with the first argument, right? And I don't think anybody should be given citizenship. I think a green card with a very long process to citizenship is probably the preferable system.
But wait, if I could push back a little, you started off talking about people in the 80s that were promised green cards. I mean, if that's not a very long green card, And that's 40 years ago, 45, So,
Yeah, I mean, and those people, I mean, because it's so hard to know exactly like when somebody had maybe came here, and it would just be hard policy to enact to say, if, okay, if you came here in the 80s, then you have a quicker path to citizenship than somebody who just came here. I think that would just be really hard to enact. I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with it though.
I mean, if you were going to do,
Uh,
I'm just off the top of my head. I mean, if you were going to do something, let's say like workers that have been here longer, that have a good track record, are prioritized with a process to citizenship versus workers that haven't been here long. I think that would be doable. You know what I mean? Like if you've been here 35 years and you haven't used any welfare, committed any crime, anything like that, yeah, you should probably have a case for being allowed to stay here permanently more than someone that's only been here 1 year on a green card. I think that's probably reasonable.
yeah, I absolutely agree with that for sure. Yeah, and I guess
But you
it would
understand.
just
So
be
let me ask you this then. Of the two extremes then, the give people citizenship versus kick all the illegals out, which one do you lean closer to?
so I personally lean closer to g- okay, give them so you said give them citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay, so I definitely wouldn't be on that extreme then because I
Because that's
definitely don't.
and the only reason I say that, that was the stated policy of Kamala Harris and Chuck Schumer. They wanted a pathway to citizenship. So
Yeah, did they
you're
ever state the period of like the length of time
no,
that
they
that
were
would
very vague. They were very vague about it.
which I did not support Kamala Harris, by the way, just to make
Fair,
that clear.
fair enough. But I'm saying of the two, basically you had one presidential candidate running on a pathway to citizenship for illegals and the other running on basically kick them out. So I'm not just pulling those two positions arbitrarily, right? Like those were basically the
Yeah,
stated two immigration policies on the ballot. If I had to guess, you're saying, look, I'm not suggesting a pathway to citizenship, but I also don't want to kick them all out. We should have sort of a merit-based system where if you were here and illegally, you're allowed to stay if you go through a certain process, as long as you can prove that you're beneficial to the country. Is that probably close to what you're suggesting?
yes, yeah, that's exactly what I'm
It's
suggesting.
it's I'm not that far off from you, if I'm honest. I'm really not. The devil
Okay,
will be in the details, like who decides if you're beneficial to the country or not. Because it could be subjective. What does beneficial mean, right? Like maybe I pay in taxes slightly less than I take out in government services, but I volunteer at the local soup kitchen. I'm a volunteer firefighter. You know what I mean? That's not
right.
money per se, but that's beneficial to society, right? So how do you weigh who gets to make that determination? Who's beneficial? I don't know. You probably do unfortunately have to have something like, do you put more money into the system than you take out? Is probably how that would have to be written into law. But yeah, I mean the devil's in the details. That's the problem. Extreme policies are necessary when good faith policies that are more moderate have been exploited, right? And so let me give you an example. If you were trying to be reasonable and you're like, look, we're not trying to lock up people that are committing petty crimes that are just trying to survive. So if someone steals something less than $200, we're not going to throw the book at them. We'll give them a slap on the wrist and say, don't do it again, right? And then
Yeah, this happened in San Francisco, right?
right, and then
Essentially.
all of a sudden people just take advantage of that and they're stealing $199 worth of shit every day, every day, every day, every day, every day. And all of a sudden businesses are like, we can't do this anymore. It wouldn't be a big deal if it happened once in a blue moon, but it's happening every day, over and over and over again. So we're going to move. And then all of a sudden the town's like, well, shit, we're not going to have any stores left. So now we got to bring the hammer down. Sorry, you get caught shoplifting even a stick of gum, your ass is going to jail. That's it. Because you gave an inch and people took them out. That's what happened with our immigration system. In an
Yeah,
ideal
and I'm
immigration system where everyone's good faith, right? I don't have a problem with sort of like even the refugee system. Yeah, there are certainly people that I think are fleeing tragic situations that probably could seek some sort of asylum in the United States, and I'd be okay with it. The problem is that's been exploited millions of times. So at this point, you just have to say, I'm sorry, no. The answer is no to everyone. Because as soon as I say, okay, let me hear out this one person, they'll say, and here's 10 million more people you need to hear out. See, all of them have equal claims. And so you just have to say, like, no, sorry. So that's where I feel we're at with our immigration system. I'm sure there are illegals that are here that are hardworking and good for the country. Well, then you need to go and then come back the right way. And if you have a good enough track record and there's going to be some expedited, you don't have to physically leave, but you do have to show up to this court hearing. You have to prove your case and you have to abide by that court hearing. Okay. If you miss that court hearing, sorry, you're out. I don't give a shit. Like, that's it. We're not pissing around anymore.
Do you think, like, let's say, like, I don't know, Trump was able to accomplish exactly what you're talking about, getting as many people out as quick as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's going to crash a lot of the industries that they are supporting, like, I don't know, the agriculture industry?
No, I think that so first off, like, think of how immoral the argument you're making. Why would let's just go through this quickly. Why would the agriculture industry collapse if we kicked illegals out?
Because it's been shown that a lot of them are working in that industry.
Why won't Americans work those jobs?
Like, why won't they switch?
Your argument seems to be that there's a lot of jobs in the agriculture industry.
Yeah.
So the reason I could get cheap fruit is because there are employees that happen to be illegal that are picking fruit, right?
Yeah, so that is my position. And what I will say to this is, if we kicked all of those people out, right, and everybody who was unemployed in the US stopped working or started working in that industry, it would still leave a gap of, like, I believe it's about 6% of jobs unfilled in that industry.
Okay, so 6% of the jobs go unfilled. First off, why aren't Americans doing those jobs now?
Because they don't have to. In fact, I would argue that because people are coming in and doing those jobs, Americans have benefited from that and been able
what do you
to
mean
take
don't have
jobs
to?
that are.
But what's implicit in saying don't have to? Have to. Like, I don't have to be a celebrity. I don't have to be a professional football player. Right? You would agree with that.
Yes.
So when you say don't have to, let's just cut the shit. You're saying these are fucking tough jobs that don't pay much.
Yeah. Yes.
Americans don't want those jobs, right?
Yes, that is what
they
I'm
don't
saying.
want that job for the wage that's being offered.
Yes.
So we could live in luxury. We need foreigners to come in and do these difficult jobs that we're unwilling to do. That way we could sit on our couch and live a life of luxury while they break their backs doing this difficult work.
Unfortunately, that's kind of the reality we're in, which is why
I find that
I'm for
immoral.
giving them green cards.
Well, okay, what if we did this instead, though? Hear me out here. What if we did this? Instead of, like, paying them these shitty wages, what if we offered them, like, a permanent place of residence, right? And then we just gave them all their meals and all of their, like, a roof over their heads. So they didn't have to get paid, like, minimum wage or anything. That would be beneficial to these people, right? Because it's still better than when they're coming from back home, right?
I'm just gonna say yes. I'm not really sure where you're going with this, but
well, I mean, and we just say, they sign an agreement that say, listen, these farms depend on you now. You live on these farms, and they're generously offering you a place to live, and they're giving you square meals a day, right? And so you sign an agreement that says, well, you won't leave. You'll continue to live in that farm.
Yeah, and see, that's where I would draw the line.
Yeah, that's called slavery.
And I wouldn't.
Wait! Don't sell it short.
Them...
Don't sell it short. Don't sell this short. This institution called slavery. Think of how much cheaper our produce would be. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
but,
what are they paying them now? What are they paying them now? $5 an hour? My goodness, that adds up. What if you didn't pay them that? What if you just, hey, we're giving you a nice place. There's a nice cottage for you out back. You stay there with your friends and family too. You can stay with all of them. And then all the Americans, it's a good deal for us, right? We're paying way less for all of our agricultural supplies, right?
So I think you're trying to kind of pin something on me that I'm not saying, right? I am not for continuing the current system that we have.
So what system would you offer then?
So what I'm saying is that currently we have a large amount of people working in this industry under the system that we both don't like. Um, and
Okay.
what I'm saying is that if we were to completely get rid of them, it would cause a gap in that industry
I don't buy your
that
bullshit argument here, but fair enough. I heard this port. Great. I don't
okay,
buy
so
that.
it would
I
cause
think if we ended the welfare system, then people would work these jobs, and the people that would own these companies would be forced to pay a wage that Americans would be willing to do because they would no longer have welfare back home, so they would go to work at these places, which might lead to a slight marginal increase in the price of produce and things like that, but it wouldn't be astronomical, and it's not worth me selling my country out to a party like the Democratic Party that's obviously going to attempt to give a pathway to citizenship to change not just the demographics of this country, but to change the way that it votes so it could displace people that have actually been here that did things the right way and have a connection to what the Constitution and what the country's about. No, it's not worth that so I can pay 10 cents less on my avocado toast. Your point, you say, I understand what you're saying. I could sum up your argument for you. Your argument is, but we can't get rid of these people because even if Americans went to work, there would still be a 6% glut in the amount of people that were there, which would mean there'd be less fruit and some people, 6% less people would have their avocado toast. Okay, worth it. And now you said you don't favor the current system when I talked about exploiting these illegals so that we could live lives of luxury. You said, no, I'm not for that. So what, you would pay them more? You would legalize them and pay them more?
So what I'm saying would be better than kicking them out or our current system is allowing them to work at whatever the minimum wage is.
Then I can't afford that. Then I won't be able to afford my avocado toast. So no.
But that would shock the system a lot less than having to pull Americans from other industries.
Oftentimes what happens is people will have a preconceived notion. We like all of these people. We like them all. And so they'll work backwards from there. They'll act like we owe them something. And so they'll say things like this. Well, we have to, well, this guy debated the other day, he said this. We have to allow all these illegals to stay here. We have to because the system's screwed up until we offer a pathway until we offer legal pathways that are more accessible. We have to allow these illegals to stay. In other words, until you have the exact policy I like, then the law shouldn't be followed to de facto allow the policy that I want, or de jure, allow the policy I want. Sorry, I'm not buying that. The argument is contradictory. The arguments are as follows. One, we have to have illegal immigrants, else our produce would be so expensive, it would be ridiculous. And second, but we don't want to have cheap produce off the backs of these illegals, so instead we should make them legal and pay them more money, which would cause the price of our produce to increase. Now, if you want to make a Goldilocks argument, that's basically like, but it'll only increase the price to the exact acceptable proportion, and it will only decrease the morality of it just the acceptable portion. So I'm sorry, I don't buy that argument. I think it's simpler just to say, you're illegal, you're out. See ya.
So
if you're necessary, we'll bring you back under a legal provision for a temporary worker status.
So I don't think you're quite understanding what I'm saying, and maybe it's on me for not explaining it correctly. But what I'm saying, I'll try to make it as clear as possible, is that these people are most likely already working for under the minimum wage, right? And if we were to give them legalization status of like the green card, most likely they would just accept the jobs at the minimum wage. As opposed to if we got rid of all these people, now we have to pull Americans from other industries that are probably not even working, that are working probably above the minimum wage to these jobs. And that would cause a major influx in the price of groceries and things like that.
Yeah, I don't give a shit. I'm unpersuaded in the least bit. Nope, don't care. Well, let's go through the numbers of it. So what do you think the average illegal being paid to harvest produce is making?
It's hard to say an exact number. Do you have the numbers on this?
I don't. No.
Out of curiosity.
It's an argument people make all the time, so I'm always shocked that they don't have the market. Do you even have a ballpark idea? You think they're working
What I would
$2
say is they're
an hour?
most likely working under whatever the minimum wage is.
Okay, let's start there. What is the minimum wage in the states with this agriculture that you're talking about? What is the minimum wage in those states?
Okay. Well, let's
in
let's
general?
go through it.
15, 18, 12?
Let's go through it. So it looks like most of our agriculture in the U.S. comes from California, Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota, and Nebraska
Okay.
is where California, I believe the minimum wage is $15. I'm
Okay,
not sure what
15.
it is
Let's
in
just
Iowa.
stick with California specifically. Okay, $15
Okay.
an hour. You assume most illegals are making under that.
I would say it's likely. I wonder if they do have numbers on this. I've never looked into the specific numbers on this. What I would say is they are more likely to accept lower wages because not a lot of places will take them. So it makes sense logically that they are going to be working at a lower wage.
What do you think that does to people that are American citizens that are competing for those jobs?
It definitely does lower the wages in the short term, 100%.
What do you mean
It
short term?
lowers.
Why would it lower it in the long term as well?
So what we see is that people end up just leaving these industries, that American citizens just end up leaving these industries and working somewhere else. And it actually,
Here we go.
like,
Rich Bull pulls this number from somewhere. It says agricultural workers earn an average hourly wage of $2.74. I have questions about this stat already. Is that just illegals? Because I know people that work in agriculture that are making more than that. Salaries typically start from $1.99 per hour and go up to $3.77 per hour, 91% below national. But again, that has to do with salaries. So right, so like if you take a salaried position, but because of the nature of agriculture work, like you're a farmer, like I know farmers around here that are probably salary making like 50,000 a year, and they're probably putting in 14-hour days every day, but they're not illegal immigrants. They're just not being paid an hourly wage. But let's assume that's true. Right. Let's go back to the caller's point here. Raistlin. Right? Did I get that? Am I pronouncing that right, by the way?
yes,
Okay,
yes, you are.
Okay. So what happens is they're directly competing with people that don't have like high end degrees, that are low skilled labor, that are American citizens. Right?
Yes,
By the way, those are disproportionately people of color, right?
yes,
Okay. So, in effect, the mass influx of illegal immigrants are lowering the wages disproportionately of black Americans.
yes, yeah. That is true. And I would say that a lot of studies support that idea. There are a few that don't, but I think that is true. I think that does end up lowering the wages
I forget the
of
name.
the
I remember
American
I
workers.
remember reading this study, and what it suggested was this, that actually it about breaks even, right? That because illegals end up taking a lot more out in government services than they put in, what happens is it about breaks even because it does increase the GDP, and it's certainly of benefit to these owners of these businesses. It's a boon to them. They're happy to pay less than minimum wage for a bunch of people that they don't have to live up to occupational health standards, etc. Doesn't matter. They're illegal. They love it. Biggest favorers of illegal immigration are corporate owners. They love that shit. They're all on board with the Democrats for that. Love it. Love it. Love it. So,
Yeah,
anyways, what happens is that it basically breaks even for the country as a whole, and the winners are the illegals themselves and the business owners, and the losers are the people that compete with the illegals in the labor market, disproportionately people of color, people of low education status. But it about breaks
yeah,
even. So what we've done in effect is we benefited people that want slightly cheaper avocado toast, and we've benefited the owners, the corporate owners of much of this farming land. They kick ass. The country breaks even, and the people that lose are the people that want jobs that are outcompeted by people that are working at a lower wage than them. Is it worth it?
so that's the current system we're in
Correct.
right now, I would
Okay.
argue.
Okay.
And I've already established I do not like that system.
Okay, so
Like,
we
I
give
think
them
we
a
should
green
move
card,
away
and
from
now
that system.
these agriculture producers have to go from paying them $5 an hour to $15 an hour. But then Danny down the Smith that was like, hey, I would do that job at $15 an hour, and I'm a citizen. They say, okay, you're in. Now the illegal has a green card, but he's just lost his job because Danny, that's a citizen here, wants to work here. What do we do with that illegal? We send them packing then, right? See ya. We don't need you. Right?
See, I disagree with the fact that you would have a person completely willing to work that in every single instance.
Not every single
Like,
instance.
maybe
How
this would
about any
happen
one
in some
instance? How about any one instance?
niche instances.
How about any? Why would
Like,
that be niche?
well, because like I said, if you look at the numbers, there would be like a 6% gap if we just kicked
Okay,
all of these people
let's
out, and
assume that's
every
true.
single unemployed person was working in the agriculture industry, which would never happen
Fair
because
enough.
you can't
Okay,
force people to work
let's
there.
say that only 10% of those illegals now given green cards would be displaced. What do you do with those 10%?
10% of the
We have
people with green
here's
cards
a
are being
farm.
displaced.
10,000 illegals are working there for $5 an hour right now. We now give all 10,000 of those illegal green cards. Now they have to be paid $15 an hour. However, 1,000 American citizens say, "Oh, for $15 an hour, I'll now work that job." Great. Now we have 9,000 former illegals that now have green cards working there and 1,000 American citizens working there. And we have 1,000 former illegals that now have green cards unemployed. What do we do with those 1,000 former illegals?
I would argue that the market would find somewhere for them. They would find somewhere to
Where?
work.
Where?
Oh, I mean, like specifically where, I think it would vary. I think some would end up probably in retail, and others would end
Okay,
up
so
maybe in the food
retail. So they go
industry.
to Walmart, right? Now they go to Walmart.
Hmm.
Walmart starts people off at $19 an hour. But holy shit, now look at all these illegals that are willing to work for $15 an hour. Now we're going to lower our wage to $15 an hour. Now your grandma that worked as a greeter at Walmart gets her job displaced by someone willing to do it for $4 an hour cheaper than her. Now where's grandma go?
I think this is just going to continue because
When you
I
massively
think the
influx,
argument you're
when you
presenting
massively
is,
influx the amount of labor, it lowers the value. You've increased the supply of labor, which decreases the demand, which means that employers could now pay them less.
I think the argument, yeah, I think the argument you're making is correct that if we did like a massive a massive issuing of green cards like this, most likely that would lower the wages.
So we have
Um,
currently estimates range anywhere I've seen from 11 million to 30 million illegals in this country. We giving them all green cards?
well, definitely not, because like I said, there are some of them that have like overstayed deportation orders,
Okay,
committed
let's say that's
crimes.
5%. So now we have 95% of those left that haven't committed a serious crime or overstayed deportation orders. What are you
Yeah.
doing? Are you giving them all green cards?
So what I would do is I would say, um, I, I would be for something like if they are already working in an industry or something like that, then they would
Think
be
how
able to
ridiculous that
qualify
is.
for it.
I own the fruit farm. I can't afford to pay
Hmm.
this guy $15 an hour. So I'm sorry, I'm shutting down the farm. Now what do we do with that green card holder?
I think the argument, Rob, against you is the same argument that you would actually make in favor of kicking all of these people out, because that argument is that the free market is essentially going to work it out. And that would be the same argument that I'm going to present to you, that the
But no,
free
but there
market
is
would
no
work it out.
right. And then what happens is it displaces the wages of actual workers because you've just in like so we're saying let's go on the medium end. There's 20 million illegals. We've said 5% they're gone anyways, which they would already be gone under the Stern system because deportation orders or they committed violent crimes, whatever. That leaves us with roughly 18 million illegals. And that's being generous. I would guess the number is much higher than that. But let's say 18 million illegals. We've instantly given them all green cards. 18 million people. Bam, green cards. Now,
Right.
bam, they're in the labor market. They have to be paid minimum wage like any American citizen. There they are. There's just not enough jobs. There's not. We've just influxed 18 million people now. Many of them may have been employed working under the table, making less than minimum wage. Certainly, it's going to be true that overnight they now have to be paid a minimum wage. There's going to be an awful lot of those jobs that say, employers that say, we can't afford this. We can't. Where are we going to fit 18 million people into the workforce added overnight? Where's it going to happen? And you're like, well, the free market will take care of it. It'll take care of it. And so they'll just displace themselves, or they'll place themselves in employment levels. Oh, it doesn't have to be just agriculture. It could be retail. It could be anywhere. 18 million primarily low-skilled workers out there. And that means that roughly 18 million U.S. citizens that are in that are now going to have their wages massively depressed. They're directly now competing with these 18 million people. You don't think that that's going to lead to problems to those 18 million citizens?
No, I think it will definitely in short term. It 100% would.
Does our government have a responsibility to those citizens?
Yeah, I would say so.
Then what would the government do if we go with the system that you're advocating? What would they do to those citizens that are now being displaced in the workforce? Welfare?
Yeah, that's not what I would want to advocate for. I think you're correct. It will cause, in short term, the stability issues with wages. It will cause a lot of them to drop. But I would say that in the long term, it's going to show that it's actually a positive benefit of doing this. And the issue and the question is, how do you address the people in the short term that are affected by it? And
I disagree with you with the long-term thing. I'll get to that in a second. But what do you do to those people that are negatively affected? We'll just say, on the way you're phrasing it, in the short term. What's the government do for them?
I don't know if the government really needs to do anything for them. What I would say is maybe
you're getting cheaper avocado toast. The corporation that owns the farm, they're happy. Fuck them poors, right? Fuck them.
Well, the corporations
no bleeding heart. You got the bleeding heart.
Now
for the
they're
illegal.
having to pay.
You got the bleeding heart for the illegal, but you don't have it for the poor American citizen. Now, fuck them.
The corporations and the farm owners and things like that would actually be the least happy in this scenario, because they'd actually have to pay their workers a living wage.
They might be more upset about that, but they're going to be more happy under your system than my system, because your system still increases the supply of labor, which means it decreases the demand, which means they'll pay less than the alternative.
Right. And I would say maybe you're correct, in that we should have more, let's say, more of a filtering process. Like, for example, let's say someone would work it out and be like, we need X amount of people in this industry, so let's keep X amount of people in this industry, and we need to get rid of the rest, if that makes sense.
That's why my system makes more sense, because my system says, right, that we default everyone leaves unless we have a specific need, and that we have people that have proven they can already did it, so then we give them a temporary status as long as they're beneficial. Because here's another problem you're not envisioning. I happen to live in an area in rural Pennsylvania here where there's a lot of farms. I worked on a hobby farm for some time, and I actually spent like 1 or 2 days working on a real farm. Fucking sucked. It's tough work. Right? It really is.
Yeah.
I had a lot of friends whose families own farms, or they worked on farm. My brother-in-law worked on a dairy farm for years and years. One of my best friends growing up actually married a farm girl and worked on the farm, trying to ingratiate himself into the family before he proposed for a few years. It's tough work. I've witnessed his farms around here. It used to be 2 generations ago, to operate a farm, maybe a particular farm around here, would have required 14 employees. A lot of times it was family, though. You had 4 kids, and so they were there, but you still had to hire 10 more farmhands. Now maybe that same farmland getting the same yield of crops, probably even more, now you only need 3 because technological advancements. Some of the, if you go to like the ag fairs around here, it is absolutely mind-blowing. I'd love to bring someone on that could sort of talk more about this. They have like the ability for computers to manage like something as simple as a tractor that you used to need to drive to like plow a field. You could set it all up on grids on your computer now, and that tractor could drive basically on its own and do this stuff. Now, this is a lot of the farmers around where I live don't have that shit, but it's coming. And these corporate farms that you're talking about. So in other words, the amount of physical employees that will be necessary is going to decrease substantially over the next few generations. What do we do once we're promising millions upon millions of people green cards because we need them for the ag industry, and then it turns out we don't? But we said, well, we promised you these green cards, so now you can just go work elsewhere. Now there's not this massive need, right? What do we do then? How are we planning apart? My solution to that would be, well, that's because we determine who's allowed to stay in the country based on need of a particular area of expertise. If we need 5,000 agricultural workers, then we open up 5,000 green cards to specific people that are going to work in the agriculture industry. And when those jobs are no longer necessary, we tell those people, you no longer have a green card, you have to go home. That's what we do. Your solution is, no, we mass give everyone green cards, and then we just say, well, go figure it out. You'll go find a job somewhere. You don't see the potential problems of that?
No, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, as we work through it, I'm definitely seeing the issue that you're presenting. It makes a lot of sense.
And then there's other issues, like there's people more merit-based. Like, let's say that here's an illegal that's been here and they've been working on a farm, right? But here's a foreign national who wants to get a green card and they want to come work and they're more qualified, right? They just objectively, they're younger, healthier. They've worked farming in the country they're at. They did very well. They didn't break the law. Why shouldn't we prioritize that person? Wouldn't we say, well, geez, sorry, person that was here illegally, you're out. Here comes the new guy, more qualified, as opposed to giving you a green card and then having to pay you like minimum wage or whatever. I'm no expert in any of this, but I'll say this. To me, one of the more persuasive things I've heard on this, and as someone who leans more small government, Milton Friedman, who's the mentor of Thomas Sowell, used to talk about this. You could have a welfare system, or you could have total open borders as far as work. Pick one. You can't have both.
Yeah.
Right?
Milton
Friedman sort of favored the system you're talking about. Milton Friedman was like, get rid of the welfare system, and if you want to come and work, fine. Milton Friedman famously is against the minimum wage. So he says, if you live in Mexico and you come to a farmer in Texas and you say, listen, I'll pick that fruit for $1 an hour, you should have every right to do so. Don't need a green card or anything. Yep, absolutely. You get zero welfare, nor does anyone else. American citizens don't get welfare. If you don't like it, well, you can't live here then. Why? Because you won't have money. You won't be able to exist. So you're going to have to go somewhere where the work is. See ya. Right? And that was his suggestion. But we can't keep a massive welfare system and then also say, we're just going to give 20 million people a green card overnight. Like, that seems like there's so many problems that come. I think that the best way to do it is say our laws need to be honored. And the people that we deem the most productive that are beneficial, we say, listen, you're going to have to now go through steps to be here legally, but we will give you that chance because you are productive to our country. So I'm not suggesting kick literally every 30 million people out. I'm saying the default is you're gone unless, this is if you're an illegal, unless you could prove that you're not a criminal, that you are willing to show up, that you are willing to go through a process to become legal, not a citizen, but to become legal, and that you're beneficial to the country, then we'll allow you to stay as a privilege. That's ultimately what I took. But I think that a lot of the tension in what me and your argument's going to be, and I know I'm being an asshole, but it's just because it's fun. But I don't actually think you have a shitty position, like immoral or anything. I think, though, that where our differences are going to rise on the periphery is going to be this. You have more of a moral obligation to the illegals. I think you feel like we owe them something. Not the world. I don't think you're one of those. You don't sound unreasonable to me that you're like, oh, we owe these people everything. Or, this guy debated a couple weeks ago. He said, it's a human right for anyone to live wherever they want, any country. I don't think you're saying that. But I do think that more than me, you're like, well, I kind of feel bad. And I feel bad for them too. I just don't think, I feel bad for them like I feel bad for the homeless guy. Where it's like, I'll give them my money personally. I'll give money to a homeless person. But I don't think that I should be able to force you to give money to the homeless person. But I still feel bad for the homeless person. I just don't think I have any right to tell you, no, sorry, Raistlin, you got to give that homeless guy money. That's where I'm at here. I don't think the citizens of the United States should be on the hook for Joe Biden's big mouth. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, and Rob, what you're proposing specifically seems like, now you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you're proposing getting all these people out and then making a system that isn't the one that we have now, that makes it easier for these people to come back in, as long as we see the need for them. Is that what I'm hearing?
Not necessarily. The one thing that, and I think it's important, I'm not just nitpicking, I think that it's not that physically they all need, let's say again that there's someone that is technically illegal, but they've been here 15 years and they've worked their way up in some oil rig that they work at. And they're doing a very specialized job and they're very good at it. And they haven't committed a crime. And I would say, well, you have to be here legally. I'm not saying you literally have to drag them across the border and say, now get in line. And then you can see if you can come back. There could be exceptions made for that person. Like, okay, you have to show up to a court hearing. You're going to have to prove your case. But if you show up to the court hearing and everything and prove your case and we rule that you are beneficial, then yes, we will now give you legal status to be a temporary worker and you could work here. And we will renew that every, what it would be, 2, 5 years, whatever, But until then, you temporarily you could stay and you just have to, as long as you keep attending your court hearings and you're not getting any criminal trouble, sure. And by the way, I don't mean you got a speeding ticket or, fucking jaywalking. I mean, serious shit, a felony.
DUI, DWI.
Yeah, something that would raise the level of harming people. But in general, yes, the rest of what you're saying, I basically say, it's not that and I'm not saying that necessarily it would default lead it to being easier for people to come in here. I don't know that. It may, but it may not. It may depend on the situation. Right. Like, for example, during COVID, there wasn't a lot of places, non-essential places were closed. Did we need more workers then? Probably not. So at that point, the system, because it prioritizes need, would say we're not taking many immigrants right now, right? But maybe something happens and there's have you heard, there's this sort of idea of they're building, these smart cities. It's something that I've heard Trump talk about in the past. Let's say they do that. They're like, we're going to take this federal land and we're going to build a potential city of 250,000 people. And we need an assload of workers. We need truck drivers to bring material in. We need construction workers, And maybe that means, hey, there's more jobs available that aren't being filled up at the pace that we think is necessary. We'll open it up to, 2,000 green cards in the film of construction. At that point, there would be more workers there. So it's not as simple as I would make it easier. I don't know. And I also don't know. I have almost zero trust in our institutions, which have proven that they want open borders. That's what they want, or what we've had. That's the system that they want. So they'll tell you, if you say, we'll only take it based on need, they'll say, yeah, we need all those people. We need them all. Trust us. No, fuck you. I don't trust you, right? So I don't know what sort of agency you would set up to show, that would be efficient in saying, these are the jobs we need filled right now. I mean, you hear this happening legal all the time. I've heard, particularly in the tech field, I've heard horror stories where people be like, I had to, I have some tech job at Disney, and I had to train some immigrant from India to do my job at half price just to kick me out the fucking door. Did we need that person? Probably not. But it worked for Disney, and they lobbied the right people, so they said, well, we need these people. And so they got them. So I don't know. It's not as simple. I guess what may happen is it will allow more legal immigration, my system, on an average year than we're seeing right now. So you could say it would be easier to come in legally. But that's not the way I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it as the system will now prioritize the needs of America and its people. And if that means one year we need 40,000 green cards and the next year we need 270,000, so be it. But it has nothing to do with making it easier to get in. I mean, I guess once we design that we need those positions, it should be an expedited process, but yeah.
Yeah, and the main reason with bringing this up is I actually would be very pro your system, as opposed to honestly what's been presented on the right. This is the criticism of the right, even though I kind of identify as being on the right. I think that we just only talk about one side of the issue and not the other side of the issue. That it's our system, our immigration system, is just not working. And
Let me say
especially
this.
because we,
Let me say this, not to cut you. I do apologize to cut you off. I mean, a lot
yeah,
of the I agree with you. There are people that say like no immigration at all, period, right? I have a soft spot in my heart for those people because I see where they're coming from. But that's not Trump. And those people are pissed at Trump. Like if you look at Nick Fuentes, furious at Trump over this. Oh, so in other words, we'll just call the illegals legal. You just want to increase legal immigration. Same shit. In fact, I saw someone put this the other day. This is worse. It's a worse system because at least illegal people have to live in the shadows and they won't have specific voting power. But once you make people legal, once you say we're going to open the avenues to legal, that allows them to sort of get more influence and to eventually have a pathway to citizenship, etc., which will further displace our culture, etc. So, some people might hate Trump for this. Some people might like Trump for this. But I think Trump's probably closer to what I'm suggesting than just saying no immigration at all.
I just haven't heard him talk about, the other side of it. Like I've heard him repeatedly say we need to get these people out, especially the criminals and the rapists and the people bringing in drugs but I've never heard him talk about, okay, but also our immigration system sucks and that needs to be addressed as well.
Yeah,
I just haven't heard the right.
You know what I'll do? I'll see for my show next week. I'll see if I can find anything where he says that. Those sorts of things, or people for his incoming administration that are saying that. But it's certainly out there. I've seen it. I don't have anything saved or anything. But I'm going to let you go because Janice, who's been trying to get his mic working all night, apparently just got it working. And I'm going to try to get out of here in like 10, 15 minutes. But I do appreciate the call. I know I could be a little abrasive, but I understand where you're coming from, and I don't think it's a shitty place. I really don't. I just think that there's a lot of potential problems that sometimes having a big heart could lead to. So.
All right. Yeah, you have a good one.
Yep, we'll talk soon, I hope. Take it easy.
Yep.
Like, all right. All right, Janice, Super Chat says, enjoying the show. Got my mic working now, so oops, wrong button. Let's move them in. Janice, can you hear me? You there? I heard you, like, briefly when you came on. Oh. Okay. Both parties, the establishment of both parties, want mass influx of immigrants, including illegals. They want that. Many of the people in the Republican Party wanted that because their donors want the cheap labor, and the people in the Democrat Party want that because they want voters that they think will vote for them and demographic shifts, etc. And it's part of the globalist agenda that I see that wants to erode national identity. And the best way to erode national identity is to shuffle people all around the globe all the time so people don't have a real connection to the country that they're in. That's how I feel. All right, Janice, we're going to try you one more time here. I know you just backed up. Janice, can you hear me? I feel bad, man, especially because you super chatted. Your mic's working, and I know you've been trying to come on all.
Can you hear me?
There you go. All right.
No?
I got you. Can you hear me? Hello? No, I hear you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. How you doing?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Test.
Yes, I can hear
Test.
you.
1, 2.
Now you can't hear me.
Test.
Oh, this is hilarious. Yes, I can hear you.
You can hear me.
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh yeah. Awesome, man. Thanks for having me
Oh,
on.
no problem. I know what to.
Can you hear-
Can I ask you roughly
you-
how old you are? You don't have to give me a specific age. Hello? You there? Oh shit.
There's a delay.
Hey, can you hear me? All right. What might be happening is the audio is not coming through Discord. You're watching my
49.
You're watching my video and hearing the audio through me talking on the video. What you need to do is fix your headset so it's playing the audio through the Discord.
I can hear you.
You can hear me. All right, man. We're going to have to let you go. There's something getting lost in the shuffle here. Okay, man. Good try. We'll get her worked out someday. We'll try the next call-in show. So, thanks so much. I do apologize, man. But, well, there you have it. An inauspicious end. All right. Well, thanks to all the callers here tonight. Like I said, we'll try to get to that Scott Horton interview clipped and just put out there separately. But if you missed it, you go back. It's basically the first hour of the show tonight. Let's see. Let's raid someone on Twitch. Oh, boy. Wow, the wind's really going here like crazy.
My
Wow, the wind's
goodness.
really going here like crazy.
My
Wow, the wind's
goodness,
really
who we
going here
raiding?
like crazy.
My
Wow, the wind's
goodness,
really
who
going
lecture
here
for?
crazy.
My
Wow, the wind's
goodness,
really
who
going
lecture
here
for?
crazy. He's a good.
My goodness, who
So,
lecture for?
I'll try to stream Monday or Tuesday night. So, I'll try to stream Monday or Tuesday night. Oops. So, now I'm screwing up audio stuff. But I do go into work tomorrow, so probably won't be streaming tomorrow. So we'll try Monday or Tuesday night. It'll just be YouTube exclusive though, because when I'm at work, I have to wait until I clock out, and then I can only stream on my phone. So that'll be the what's going on. But I appreciate all of you. Check out that interview with Scott Horton. I think I fixed the echo issue. Sorry about that. Or is it still echoing? Shouldn't be. Are we still echoing? Yeah. My Twitch was on there. But anyways, so yeah, check that out. I'm going to be putting more shorts out and everything like that, so I really appreciate it. I hope you all had a tremendous Thanksgiving. Thank you all for tuning in to me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all the incredible donations. Thank you to all the callers. I really appreciate all of you. Happy you stick through with me, even when we have audio issues and echoes, and it's still a lot of fun to me. So thanks so much, everyone. We'll talk to you all soon. As always, have a good one.